I like to have him along. He is also a city commissioner for Garnett and soon to be our mayor. And he'll talk to you a little bit from that perspective as well. So again, Mike Burns, President and CEO of Auburn Pharmacy. We have pharmacies across Kansas and Missouri. I bought my first pharmacy at the age of 25 back in 1992, Garnett, Kansas. Why? Because I wanted to take care of patients my way. I worked at the pharmacy in Eudora all through pharmacy school. I got out, worked for Kmart for a year and a half. I learned some things operationally. They were doing some neat things, but as far as patient care, they weren't doing things the way the big chains didn't do it, how I grew up and how I wanted to do it. So went to Garnett, bought my first little store. Back then, 30% of our business was what we call third party. 70% was cash. That's where the patients got to choose their pharmacy based on location, convenience, service, and price, because 70% of you were paying out of pocket. Med D had not came along yet. That didn't come along until about 2004 to 2005. You all probably remember those days. I'm going to talk a little bit about, where we got today. First of all, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because then I can walk around. I tend to talk loud anyway. But talking about PBM reform, let's go all the way back to the 1990s. Back in the 1990s, as you all remember, we didn't have prescription drug insurance. We barely had Medicaid to pay for prescriptions. But then as medication became a larger and larger part of how we delivered health care, then employers who provided health coverage for their employees and insurance companies felt like it was probably the right thing to do is to start providing some coverage for prescriptions. And we're probably going to go up here and just going to start on the screen. I'll get to that here in a minute. So, but if you think about it back then, I remember, my mom and dad shared in Elmwood. My dad was a lumber salesman and had Mid-America Lumberman's insurance. And so at the end of the year, they would take our receipts and send them in and get 80% back. Remember those days where you didn't have any prescription drug insurance? Well, that was a lot of work. You can imagine your insurance companies and your payers trying to handle all those receipts and all the reports and everything coming in. So then someone came up with the idea, just like when you were going to bill for, when you went in for an office call, you would pay your office visit and then the doctor's office would bill your insurance company. That process was already in place and set up, but there was no process for how the pharmacy would bill the insurance company for the prescriptions you got, where you would only pay your copay and then they would bill the payer. That's where a pharmacy benefit manager came into play. They came in and said, you know what, we're going to have a way where they started a contract with the local pharmacies. They came in and said where they were representing Goodyear, General Motors, Frito-Lay, think of some of your larger employers up in this area, and other insurance companies, said, if we go contract with the pharmacy and get the pharmacy to agree to accept a certain level of reimbursement, the other big deal is they asked us to do the paperwork. That was the big deal, okay? They said, but Mike, if you're going to take care of these patients, at that point may have been 1 or 2, 3% of our business, but then we had to fill out the paperwork. We would charge you the copay. We'd fill out the paperwork. Then we would take the forms. They were paper at the time. We would send them in waiting to be paid. That's how it all started. And it made sense. Okay. We needed to have someone there to help streamline and bring efficiency to determining benefits, who had benefits, who didn't, what your portion was to pay, and then what the employer or the insurance company was to pay. So that's where then, yes, the pharmacy benefit manager was born. From that, then they got, yeah, you could back up just a couple of screens, but so then, I'm gonna walk around just. Yeah. So then we, as they got more and more business, they would come in, and so then they realized, you know what? The payer over here has no idea what we're paying the pharmacy. We have a contract with the pharmacy that they don't know about, and in fact, our contracts today prohibit me from sharing anything about the reimbursement in certain terms with the employer or the insurance company is paying. Isn't that nice? We call those gag clauses. Okay, they don't want me to tell an employer that the employer is paying more than I'm getting paid, and there's a spread in the middle. So once the PBMs recognize that they're in a unique situation where they're contracting with the pharmacies, but the payers don't know what you're paying the pharmacies, so they started reducing what they're paying the pharmacies. At the same time, they're telling the employer and the insurance company they're paying them per claim to handle the claim, thinking that's all they're paying. So your pharmacy benefit manager handling the pharmacy benefit was getting paid per prescription, per claim to help set all this up. Then they also were getting the spread. They were paying me less than what they were billing the employer. It's a nice position to be in. Also under contract, I can't tell the employer what's going on. Then, as they grew, they got bigger and bigger. There were more and more PBMs that came on the scene because there was a lot of money. Then they also found themselves, they realized, you know what? We're the ones that get to determine which medications are covered, which ones aren't, and what you as a patient pay for those prescriptions. And again, the employers weren't really aware of all that was going on, but so then they went to the manufacturers and said, if you want your drug covered, which who wouldn't, we're going to ask that you give us a small rebate back. I call it a kickback. They call it a formulary rebate. I want a kickback, or I'm not going to cover your drug. Well, those started out maybe 5–10%. So now they're getting the per claim fee to manage it. They're getting the spread pricing in between what they're charging the employer and what they're paying me. Now they're going to the manufacturer and getting a big kickback. This went on to the point where today, 98–99% of prescriptions are all processed through a PBM in some way. And there are 3 PBMs that control 82–83% of the business. That is an oligopoly, but it is working today like a monopoly. The PBMs got so wealthy, they went out and bought the biggest insurance companies. Have you ever seen a PBM go out of business? First of all, it's interesting that today a lot of people don't even know what a PBM is, and they're 3 of the 16 largest companies in the country, and they don't even know who they are. But I'll bet you know who United Health is, though. Okay, well, United Health now has aligned themselves with Optum, one of the 3 largest PBMs in the world, in the country. We'll talk about that in a minute. We also have Express Scripts and Cigna. Okay, everybody's heard of Cigna, maybe not Express Scripts, but they're out of St. Louis, Missouri. They are really one of the biggest. And then we have CVS. Okay, well, CVS has Caremark, and they also now own Aetna. So you have the 3 largest health insurance companies and the 3 largest PBMs who have their own pharmacies, whether they have the CVS retail pharmacies or they have their mail order and their specialty pharmacies. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a monopoly. That is not a free market. That's not good for you, and it's not good for me. And it's not good for the taxpayers. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. Do we have this where I kind of start rolling through there? Okay. So, kind of as a backdrop, I always want everybody to know, how in the heck did we get where we were at? And then they would say, but Mike, why would you sign those contracts? If those contracts are to the point where they're paying you less than what you pay for your medications. Today, over 30% of all prescriptions that we fill at Auburn Pharmacy, we get paid less when I pay for the medication. How am I supposed to pay this man? And when you come into a pharmacy and you need help right away, you appreciate having that pharmacist. Where they want to try to push everything to their mail order, to their specialty, what we call affiliated pharmacies, where we have found and proved that they pay their own pharmacies sometimes 10, 20, 30 times more than they pay us. Isn't that nice? Guess what? I'm not supposed to talk to you about that. Okay, remember those gag clauses? I'm not supposed to know it, and I'm not supposed to talk about it. But ladies and gentlemen, if I don't, our pharmacies are going to continue to close. Last year, we had 10 or 12 pharmacies here in Kansas close, never to reopen. We're probably going to have another 10 or 12 closed today. There's thousands of pharmacies closing across America every day. It is unsustainable. And so when we think about Nate and I on the drive up here, we're talking about some things. And also, I mean, no one understands more than us how how important it is for you all to have access to a pharmacist where you can call on the phone and speak to them or walk in and talk to them face to face. Sometimes we do have challenges in dealing with technology. Okay, I'm about to turn 60. Sometimes I turn my phone over to my daughters and I'm like, just do it. Okay, I get it. But just imagine if you didn't have a local pharmacy to go to. Okay, if you can't get a hold of your cable company to figure out how you can watch the Royals this afternoon, which is a big deal, but that's not going to impact your life too greatly. But if you can't get a hold of a pharmacy or you can't get access to your needed medications, that is life threatening. And that's happening every day. So first, it was the very first screen. So here's what this is kind of complicated. Come back here, there's no way you're going to be able to see it. But what we have here is we have the pharmacy, we have the pharmacy benefit manager, we have the manufacturer, and we have the wholesaler. And somewhere involved in there is you, the patient. And we believe that you're one of the most important parts. But unfortunately, that gets overlooked a lot in this whole system now because it's really all about making money for the insurance companies and the pharmacy benefit managers. Again, I can give you the printouts if you want to go look at them. You're going to have that saved so you can print those for them. Next screen, please. All this does is it talks about the consolidation. If you can't see from back there, we've got starting back in 2000, pretty easy to see how many pharmacy benefit managers we had. And this was only the major PBMs, okay, because there was about 400 at one time. That was in 2000. You go to 2006, you go to 2012, 2018, look at 2021, look at what we got. The FTC allowed this to happen. We need our state to step in and help. Just because it's a federal, they say it's a federal issue, federal needs to fix it. Ladies and gentlemen, you're here for a reason because you're very involved in politics. I spent more time in Washington, D.C. the last 10 years than I care to admit. Well, things don't happen quickly. It's tough to get things done up there. Here, we can make a difference locally. We can make changes, but we have to have people advocate for that. We need people like you to step up and recognize we have a problem. And we're going to hold our legislators here in the state of Kansas to fix it for all of us, for the taxpayers, the employers, and the patients, and yes, the providers. I may sound like, I'm just a pharmacist up here crying because I want to make more money. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm struggling to keep our pharmacies open. About a year and a half ago, one of our competitors who used to work for us, Nate Rockers and Paola, just abruptly closed the doors. Okay, right down the street from us. Okay, we're not uniquely different than Nate. We're still hanging in there. We're trying not to go anywhere, but it's not easy. We need PBM reform. We need our Kansas legislature to step up and force what we call transparency. We need to do away with spread pricing. Why should the PBMs be taking all the profit, trying to put the pharmacies out of business? Guess what happens when they put me out of business? You get fewer and fewer options, which does what? It forces you to their affiliated pharmacies where now they can charge what they want behind the scenes. They can also send you to their specialty pharmacies. I'm going to show you my personal experience about specialty pharmacy, what it did to me as a patient and what it did to me as an employer. And then it also sends you to mail order. Now, sometimes mail order, I'll admit, can be awfully convenient. I am an Amazon shopper. I put it in and all of a sudden, seriously, it shows up at my doorstep. But healthcare, you can't always do that. Okay. So mail order pharmacy is not always your option. Specialty is not a good option. You need to have access to a local pharmacy. But this exemplifies what has happened about the consolidation. Does that not scare you? Because you don't realize what's happening, but it's increasing costs for everyone. But they will tell you, oh, good thing we're here. Good thing, especially the PBMs, good thing we're here. We're helping control costs. And I say, you know what? You sure are. That's right, for yourself. It's self-dealing. But you're not really saving money. You're adding cost to the system. Talk more about how it happens. Next screen. This just tells you a little bit more about the consolidation. You've got CVS Caremark there, 34%, Express Scripts, 23%, Optum, 22%. Then you got Humana, MedImpact, and Prime, which Prime then had jumped on to Express Scripts last year, taking them. So that's all we've got right there. Those are your major PBMs. That's it. But you look at the three that control the vast majority of it, and that's where we're the problem. And then you go through here, they've got all the specialty pharmacies in there, but we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, now here's where I'm going to talk a little bit about what they do. and I wish this was more clear, but if what you can see in here is cancer drug for a 30-day supply. I'm just gonna jump to my personal experience because I think it'll explain what's going on here, where you can see, all you gotta see here is local pharmacy, $125. Okay, PBM and mail order, the 1,500. That should infuriate you. That happens every single day. Let me tell you about me. A few years ago, I got told those 3 words. So now here I am, I'm visiting with my doctor, my team. I'm setting up my treatment between my radiation, my chemotherapy, my IV, and my oral. So I get my prescription for capecitabine. Next screen, please. Okay, right there it is, sitting on my shelf. So I go to the pharmacy with my prescription, going to fill my own prescription. Now here I am, I'm the patient, but I'm also the pharmacist, and I'm a pharmacy owner, but I'm also the plan sponsor, meaning the business owner who now is responsible for putting together the healthcare plan to provide healthcare for my employees and prescription drugs for my employees, including me. So here I go to fill my prescription. I get it down, I send it through. You see what happens in the pharmacy, they're in there, I input it. Guess what comes back? Rejected. Specialty pharmacy only. Now I'm under contract at the time with Optum. I was with Blue Cross Blue Shield, fully insured company. We had insurance with Blue Cross. They were using Optum as a PBM. Now already, even though this was 5 or 6 years ago, I already knew what was going on with the PBMs and how much they were gaming the system. But I said, you know what, now I'm going to get to see this firsthand. So I send the prescription in, send it in to the specialty pharmacy, which happened to be in Kansas City. By the way, you know who gets to determine what specialty? PBM. Mm-hmm. Why is it special? They say because it's high cost and it's a more complex therapy requiring more monitoring and oversight and management of you and your healthcare because it's a specialty drug. So let me tell you what they did when they took this specialty drug where I couldn't fill it off my shelf and made me get it through the specialty. Okay, next slide. You can't see this. This is what we call an EOB, an explanation of benefits. You all get that. Probably, you know, when you go to the pharmacy or go to the doctor, it says, hey, here's the allowed amount. Here's what you paid. Here's what the plan paid. Well, this is what I got. What I did, just slide forward a couple. You're not going to want to go through these, but it's all right there in detail. When I added it all up, I had to take 2 strengths for 6 months. That's 12 prescriptions. Guys, if we can make 15 to 20 bucks a prescription, we're feeling pretty good. We can keep our doors open and make sure and take care of you. So across 12 prescriptions, okay, you're looking at about maybe a couple $100. Let's even say $300. Let's go to the next screen. Okay, somehow we've zoomed in. If you can zoom out. Okay, here's what this is going to tell you. Okay, the final numbers. I'm just going to read them off to you. The final numbers are this. My cost after all rebates and everything for the 6 month of therapy would have been $2,600. Now remember, if we could have made $300, a little bit on each one of them, we'd have been pretty happy. That makes $2,900. What do you think happened when they made it go specialty? Do you think they charged $2,900? Now, if they're there to help control costs, and God knows they're probably buying better than we are. Okay, but I'll tell you, Auburn, we buy more pharmaceuticals in Kansas, and still, I'm pretty sure they bought better than I did. So then what they did is they billed the plan. Now this is just billed amount, not allowed amount. They billed the plan at $54,000, which is absurd. Mm-hmm. But they still allowed $15,300 that got billed to my plan instead of $2,900. So think about that. That's about a $13,000 extra markup. Yeah, I see look on your face. It happened. And this happens thousands, if not tens of thousands of times every day in our country. And you wonder why prescription drug prices are going up, and you wonder why healthcare costs are going up. Ladies and gentlemen, our middlemen are driving the prices up for their own benefit, and you right now, if we don't get PBM reform, we can't do anything about it.
Can you restate that? Did you just say $13,000 markup?
Extra markup, yes, and I will give you the documentation to prove it, okay? So yes, I was not happy. So I decided at that point, yes, that's a 4,000% markup, something crazy like that. Okay, and again, because it's more complex therapy, you know, not one time did I get a phone call from that pharmacy asking Mike Burns, how you doing? Got any questions? Not once, not one time. Okay, so when they talk about specialty pharmacy from a pharmacy benefit manager, I want you to understand this is what they're doing. They're sending you to places they won't let you come to your local pharmacy. In fact, some of the manufacturers won't even sell to your local pharmacy because the PBMs have it set up to go through their own specialty. So why even sell it to Auburn Pharmacy when no one can come to me and get it? You should be able to, but you can't. So I embarked on a strategy. I said, you know what, I'm really upset. I realized I get to get away from the PBMs because I realized what happens when they bill your plan for higher costs the next year, what do they do to your insurance premiums? They raise it. So think about this. How nice is that? Just on one drug, they got to make an extra $13,000 only for the right to come back to me next year and say, hey, Mike, you spent a lot of money. We got to raise your insurance premiums, making even more money. That's what's been happening. I can't be any more clear than that. I hope you all can understand what I've just explained to you. And it happens when they send this to mail order as well. They tell the employers, if you go mail order, it's going to save you money. Remember, the employers don't get to see what I'm being paid. We're starting to lift a skirt on that. Okay. We're to the point now where I don't care. You have to see what I'm not being paid. There are prescriptions, and Nate's going to talk a little bit about this, the things that we have to do today. We never thought we would ever have to think about not being able to take care of a patient because we can't sell a prescription that costs us $1,000 and get paid $800. That's what's happening. There are prescriptions where we, in fact, if you'll jump to the next screen. Okay, play this real quick. I'm gonna see if you all, I wanna watch my time, Nate, make sure I stay on. Okay, 1:26, we still got a lot of time. Okay, go and see if you can play this.
Most Americans have very needy. Most Americans have urban views and a good friend years ago until like there's a big into the same issue. Everybody's either be so or business struggle. They have a lot of money. That's what this is. It is bad. It's like America's PBMs are strong. They're powerful. A lot of money and they spend on it. The United States is the hottest drug process in the world. The United States, only country.
You able to hear that?
Explaining
We can sort of,
prescription
but
drug prices.
Internet choppy or something.
Okay, we'll just,
It's pretty simple.
this is a dear friend of mine, Dan from Wisconsin.
Are inflated.
And he has been working real hard. His daughter actually is in the film business. So he went to her and said, honey, you need to help me. We need to start putting together some films and videos out there to try to explain to the American public what's going on. I have 3 of these clips in there. I would share, you've got the file, you can keep my flash drive. If she'll give it to you, go home, you can, if you can copy, share, whatever you do, play those videos. It'll also take you to a website where there's tons of videos that helps explain what I'm talking to you about in pretty plain language, okay? But it talks about the different things that have been going on in the country. So let's jump to the next screen. And remember what's coming up next year. Okay. Oh, these are just copies. These are actually, they're getting a little bit faded here. There we lost $1,066. There we lost 34.31. That one we lost $100. Those are actually what we look at when you come in. You don't get to see this. We're back here filling your prescription, taking care of you. What you don't realize is we're taking a look at this and saying this is not sustainable. Okay, we're getting paid less than what we pay for the medication, not to mention our operational overhead. And this is real. It's real. It's not a lie. This isn't just pharmacy begging for, they want to make too much money. We're just trying to stay here for you. Okay, next screen. It might be another. Okay, here's what I did when I cut the middleman out. I said, you know what? I have the ability, but I'm very unique. I've got a group of pharmacies. I'm a pharmacist. I understand the game. I said, you know what? I'm going to cut you out. I also paid my pharmacy fare at $15 to $20 per prescription. Okay, when one of our employees goes into one of our own pharmacies or their family goes into our pharmacies are being reimbursed fairly. Okay, why would I want to rob from Peter to pay Paul, right? One pocket to the other, so we're going to pay fairly. And then, but we cut the PBM out. Okay, so now, you know, they're not doing the spread pricing. And then, yes, then I got to participate in those rebates, put those back in where I can help lower my costs. What I did, and does anyone know on average what healthcare costs go up per year? Okay, right now it's averaging about 12%. Some reports say 9%. I've seen a lot of folks come to me and they've increased 16, 18%, 20%. What I was able to do, and this is why this is important, because the PBMs and the large insurance groups, these big 3 groups will tell you that if there's reform, costs are gonna go up. They don't want people to know that if they're cut out, we can still deliver excellent health care and actually save money. What that is going to show you is the 21, 22, 23, 24, 25 is not done. But if you showed 18, 19, and 20, okay, you see where those are relatively flat? That's what Auburn Pharmacy pays for our health insurance. How in the heck did I do that? How did I keep my costs flat across the last 4 years? And we've also increased benefits to our employees at the same time. We've offered an HSA, we've offered a buy-up plan. We've been able to actually increase the insurance benefits that we provide to our employees at the same time, keeping it flat. The only way we do it is I cut the PBM out. But guess what? How hard is that for other employers to figure out? They don't know what I know, and when the brokers come in, which I'm gonna make, I'll tell a little bit about the city of Garnet. I'm gonna make some talk here just.
Okay. In the frame?
Yeah,
Camera?
yeah, that's good.
So when I got elected as city commissioner, knowing what I know about PBMs, I went to our city manager and our HR manager for Garnet, and I said, we need to evaluate a transparent PBM model. We need to look at carving out Optum, because that's who our PBM, United Healthcare Insurance with Optum as the PBM. And the first year, we requested data so we could evaluate what we're spending on the pharmacy benefit. And our broker didn't reply to the request. And we'd asked again, they didn't reply, and then before you know it, it's time for renewal, and we just have to roll with a typical renewal, fully insured. This year comes around, and I started a little bit earlier, and I made the request. Told it's not a lot of data, just we need 5 pieces of information. Don't need any identifiers. We don't want to know who's getting the prescriptions or who's, where the dollars being spent on whom. We don't want to know that. We just want to know how much is being spent, where the money's going. And our broker came back with a reply this year and said, you don't want to do that. And I realize the city of Garnet doesn't have a ton of employees. It may not be in our best interest to pursue a partially self-insured or fully self-insured option with about 60 employees. But it's our decision whether we do that or not, and they're withholding the information we need to make that choice. And the reason for that is because the brokers are also involved with the PBM scheme in managing benefits. So when you're presented with information as an employer, the cards are already stacked against you when trying to make informed decisions, because the information that you're getting is what they want you to see.
That's really the point. Thanks, Dave. And employers run into this every day, trying to get to the bottom line, trying to figure out, again, what would be my expenses if I could see, where all the prescription drug, where it all went. They're not allowed to see that. So what happens is the brokers who involve, and I guess everybody's got to make a profit. I'm not against that. But the brokers, obviously, they have money at stake. If this were to start to go away or the onion be peeled back, they're going to make less money. Because that's going to get shared back with the employer, which gets shared back with the employees, lowering what you pay, lowering your co-pays, right? Lowering everybody's costs. But they tell employers, you don't want to do that. And employers are unable to say, well, yeah, but I'd like to know if I had a transparent program, pharmacy benefit, and self-funded last year compared to what I did with you, what would that look like? Well, the only way you can know that is if you get to see last year how much you spent on healthcare and where it went, right? Where the costs were. You're never going to get to see that. Because then you'd be able to compare and go, look at all that extra money. But they're not letting you see that. So next slide, because the other thing I want to talk a little bit about, okay, is right here, all of the settlements to tell you the behavior of these PBMs and the things that they get away with. There's not a industry that I know of that continue to lie, cheat, and steal. Yes, I said it, and get away with it. They write checks for settlements out of court and keep doing business as usual. In 2021, Derek Schmidt, I've known Derek for a lot of years. He, as Attorney General, went after Centene, who was administering the Medicaid program, and found that they were overbilling, undercharging, not reporting correctly. And they wrote a check for 27.6, it's on here somewhere, 27.6 million. It's a lot of money for the state of Kansas. That's only one PBM, one. And it was right here in Kansas. If I showed you the whole list, there'd be hundreds on there. I just highlighted some here for you to see. And in fact, right now, Centene, not even made this list, but look at Illinois, Arkansas, and Centene, 71 million. Ohio, 15 million. Mississippi and Centene, 55 million. Oklahoma, CVS Caremark, 32 million. Right now, Centene's facing a 1.2 billion case. You know what? They've got the money. When you're making billions of dollars and you can write the checks, pay for your bad behavior, and keep doing what you've been doing, we have to fix that. We desperately have to fix it. So I always want to point out, this is not hyperbole. This is fact. This is all, you can go out and research it, find out, PBM supplements, and it's all over the internet. It's all out. Let's jump to the next screen. This is going to be another video that I hope you all get to watch. If you sit and talk about it, if you sit and watch it, okay, it talks about Centene violations, and it goes in. Okay.
Transparency saves lives. Yet what lies beneath the surface could shock you. Centene Corporation, a behemoth in the healthcare services industry, has faced a whopping $1,919,146,010 in penalties. These include numerous violations such as the False Claims Act, consumer protection breaches, and more. Just imagine, Centene isn't alone in this. There are other entities like pharmacy benefit managers, PBMs, whose activities remain largely unseen. What if all 50 states had the resources to dig deep, to scrutinize every action these PBMs are taking? The implications could be monumental. The potential penalties could skyrocket, exposing even greater truths. This is about more than dollars and cents. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring the system is working for the people it serves. We need transparent and accountable healthcare systems. The time to act is now. Uncovering the truth starts with a collective effort from states, officials, and you. Join the movement for a healthier, more transparent tomorrow.
Okay, and one would say, why? How are they able to get away with this? Today, PBMs enjoy, we do have about 30 other states, not Kansas. I'll talk a little bit about that. We have 30 other states who have some level of legislation that's creating transparency and requiring the PBMs to share what's going on. And I'm going to share another screen because the first thing, remember what I told you, the story you're going to hear, okay? And God bless, okay, the gentleman came up and the son works for Cigna, okay? Don't take this wrong, but if we find out, okay, that we can save money, they don't want you to know that. We have, and that's the first thing you're going to hear. Well, if you want minimum reimbursement for pharmacies here in Kansas, okay, for Kansas Medicaid, we have what we call NADAC, that's a National Average Drug Acquisition Cost. Pay us about the cost of med plus $10.50. That study of cost to dispense was done in 2017. You think our costs went up a little bit? A lot. We're still getting $10.50, but guess what? That's better than the other PBMs. There's times PBMs were making $1.90, we're losing $100. But they're going to tell you that if you step in, or if our legislators step in, costs are going to go up. We now know that that's not true. You saw what happened with Auburn Pharmacy. Let me show you what's happened in other states right here. Okay, right here, California, 380 million in estimated taxpayer savings in the first year, with 144 million also on top of the 380 million restored to independent pharmacies through eliminations of clawbacks. So as you look through each of these, the states that have been brave enough to do it have had legislators that are not going to be on the take by the PBM to say, I'm going to step up and act on behalf of my constituents, because everybody's got to be either a taxpayer, a patient, or an employer, or an employee. Somewhere we're touched by all of that. We're all paying the tab. So look what these other states have done. Okay. So as you see, the other states that have done it, we've actually lowered costs and put money back in the hands of the providers. So we are here to take care of you. You can do both. We can save our providers and save money at the same time. Okay. Next screen. Here's the final. This is kind of a short one, I think, but here's this one. We're gonna talk about what
It's a fiduciary. It's more than a legal term. It's about trust and responsibility. A fiduciary is someone who has a legal and ethical duty to act in your best interest. They must be loyal, diligent, transparent, and accountable, always putting you first. Duty of loyalty, avoid conflicts of interest. Duty of care, make careful, competent decision. Transparency, full disclosure, no secrets. Accountability, legal consequences for betrayal. Now here's the twist. When it comes to your healthcare, the only clear fiduciary is your employer. They offer health benefits to attract great employees, but managing a health plan is complex. So they turn to brokers, health insurers, and PBMs, the companies that manage your drug benefits. But here's the problem. Brokers, health plans, and especially PBMs are not fiduciaries. They're not legally required to put patients or employers first. And they fought hard to keep it that way. Why? One word, money. These middlemen rake in billions through hidden deals, fees, and self-dealing, all while dodging any legal obligation to serve the people paying the bills. Think about this. Your 401k plan is protected by strict fiduciary rules under ERISA. But your healthcare plan, often a much larger expense, isn't. That's backwards. More lawsuits are popping up. But we need more than court battles. We need clear legislation that requires health plans and PBMs to act in your best interest with the same fiduciary duty that protects your retirement. It's time for change. It's time for PBMs and health plans to become fiduciaries, just like they should have been all along. Join the march to 1 million, because no one should profit from your pain. And trust should never be optional, especially when it comes to your health.
Okay, so what's important there, again, people like, why are they signing these contracts? How did we get where we're at? Well, when PBMs came on the scene, they're not an insurance company, so they didn't fall under any regulations there. They're not a healthcare provider, so they didn't fall in any, they didn't exist. And so as they grew and they grew power, they still had zero regulation, and that's really where they're at today. They want to stay there. They do not want to be regulated. They don't want to have any state oversight. They want to continue to do business as usual. Now, one would ask, Mike, why do you continue to contract with them? How's this man supposed to fill prescriptions and take care of you if I don't contract with him? And that's what I call, someone calls it a death by 1,000 cuts. Okay? I've always said we'd rather die a slow death than an immediate death. Remember, those three, if I say no to those three, 82% of all my prescriptions I can't fill, I lose 82% of our business, 82% of our patients have to go somewhere else and they can't take care of you. I've been fighting hard to try to figure out how I can stay in business and continue to sign these.
When the PBMs lose these court cases, why aren't the courts putting a cease and desist ruling along with it so that they can't then immediately after they write out the check,
That is,
go back and keep doing it?
that's an excellent question. What he's saying is, look, when the courts, well, typically what they're doing, they're settling out of court, by the way. So that's what's happening. See, when you settle out of court, you realize you're gonna lose, what do? You settle out of court, then you make the other side sign a non-disclosure agreement. You can't talk about it. Okay, we're gonna write the check, we're gonna go on, but now you can't talk about it. So very few of them ever get, but that's a good point. But very few ever actually, as they realize they're gonna lose, they say, well, you know what, we'll settle out of court. They write the check, they move on, nobody knows about it, okay? But people do know about it. We have to have our legislators step up. And when we talk about a fiduciary, yes, they have no obligations to take care of the employer. They have no legal or responsible authority or responsibility. That's an issue, okay? We're gonna have about another 10, 15 minutes maybe here. Yep, got about 15 minutes, okay, for questions. Okay, 10 minutes for questions, please.
We'll use the microphone so everybody.
Yeah.
You obviously have been on the board and trying to get changes made.
Yes, sir.
In our state of Kansas, have you gotten the ear of any of our legislators? Is there anybody in an elected position who hears what you're needing?
We do. I guess I can talk directly here. We have had a Speaker of the House for years who has said, I don't ever want to hear the phrase, he said this in public, I don't ever want to hear the phrase PBM reform. Guess what he does for a living?
PBM.
Insurance sales.
Guess what office he's running for? That doesn't scare you, that just gave me goosebumps, because here we're gonna have the thought, watching the hen house. And I have left him hundreds of messages, I've had hundreds of my employees leaving messages. This man has called him on behalf of the city commission. Won't return his calls. We're due that, you're a legislator. We put you in place. He's from Sedgwick County, and I have probably 100 employees in Sedgwick County who have reached out to him personally. If you won't talk to Mayor Nate because we're not in your district, but you know what? Talk to someone who's there. Nothing. Nothing. So, yes, I've been fighting hard, but I tell you, I've learned a lot about how powerful people can be. And there are people here in Kansas. I'd say Karen Tyson, some of the others, they recognize the problem, they support us. But it's getting past the roadblocks that have been put in front of us.
And it is notable that there is wide bipartisan support for PPM reform, yet there is a single legislator that has the power to keep it from coming to a vote. And there is workarounds for that. It's just, there's not enough legislators willing to buck the speaker to get around and to bring it to a full vote. But that might be our only option this year, where it's Dan's last year in the legislature. That might be our only option, because he will almost certainly deny our bill a vote, but there will be a bill.
This gentleman I know had, yes, further.
How does your business plan differ from Mark Cuban's cost plus drugs, which is certainly transparent?
Very, very transparent.
Cost
I've
plus
actually,
drugs is a totally transparent.
yeah, I've actually,
Where cost plus, it gives enough for the pharmacist to make money with it.
Yep.
So how do you differ from his?
okay, I visited with Mark Cuban. How about Mark Cuban? You know why he did what he did? Because all the business he owns, he figured, he found out he'd been lied to by the PBMs. They made him mad. He has the resources to go out and try to put them out of business. The challenge with that is, it's hard to have a mail order pharmacy with only generics. You can't survive if you can only get generics in from one pharmacy. Now, I will tell you that I am contracted with Mark. My pharmacies are contracted with Mark Cuban, so that if he can get employers to sign off, but even with his power and his clout, these employers are still listening to the brokers. Remember, you got the three up here? Even he can't break through that class ceiling, but he's trying. But if he can get employers to sign on to the transparent plans, we are here as your pharmacy to help fill prescriptions for you under his plan, so that we can still take care of you face to face, and we can still be here tomorrow. Great question. Thank you for that. Okay.
So was a bill introduced, or no bill has been introduced yet? I mean, is there a bill floating out there?
We do have a bill. It's going to be introduced very, very shortly. Okay, we know we have substantial opposition. We just talked about why.
Yeah.
We also know that we have some considerable support, but they're honest with us about the control that the speaker has. So I think the more pressure that we can put on the speaker and say, we demand this. You all have a lot of power here in speak, I would certainly guess. Okay, you need to talk to them and say, you need to allow it to be heard. Let's get it out in the open and let's talk about it. We have to at least talk about it and at least hopefully bring it to a vote.
And what committee will that bill be?
We don't exactly know yet. Beverly Gossage thinks it's gonna go through hers. Beverly is from my hometown of Eudora. Had a visit with her. I testified on Friday to the Pharmaceutical Research Committee. Had a long hour talk with Beverly. She, if I can speak on her behalf, probably not fair, but she understands the problem with PBM. She does. Guess what else she does for a living?
Insurance.
Sure. Yeah, she does. She said she does Med D supplemental plans, insurance, okay, or Med D plans, Medicare supplemental. She does not believe that Kansas should get involved. She believes it's a federal issue. I think that's kicking the can down the road. I think it's doing a disservice to Kansas and all the taxpayers and all of her constituents. And I told her that. Beverly, it is not a fair market. That's where the federal government has allowed a monopoly to get in control. at the state level. Darn it, we can step in at the state level, and we can help fix it for Kansas.
The Supreme Court ruled that the states can go.
That's right. The Supreme Court even ruled that the states do have jurisdiction here.
We have about 5 minutes
Okay.
remaining, so we'll try to be as brief as possible.
And I want to get to everybody. I'll stick around for a while and talk later. Mary?
We got right, right.
Okay, okay.
One, short question, which I know you can answer. When you say broker, is that the same as the PPM?
No,
Okay, well.
No.
You don't have to go into that now. I can look at
okay.
it.
You will go, an employer will go to a broker and say, go shop for me. They're like your travel agent,
Uh-huh.
okay? So they're gonna go shop. They're gonna try to find you the best deals and help advise you on the best major medical plan and the best pharmacy benefit plan to bring for your employees.
Okay, now my real question is, how does this relate to 340B?
That is another 2-hour conversation that I would be glad to have because Nate and I live 340B every single day, but that is a whole separate issue than PBM reform. Okay, now in the test or in the last week, Nate's got something he's gonna wanna say, but it's completely separate.
There is a little bit of overlap. When you get really deep into the weeds, there is a little overlap between PBM and 340B. The 340B issue is a Kansas Hospital Association issue at this point. Pharmacists know about it. We support 340B protections, but PBM reform, totally different. And that's what that's what pharmacists and the Kansas Farm host, as our highest priority at this point.
One of the things that we're proposing this next term is Medicaid
Preservation.
preservation, was expansion, but now we're preservation, but how do you see the proposed cuts affecting your reimbursement?
I don't see the cuts. We now have a defined reimbursement in Kansas for Medicaid. What I do see with PBM reform, the more that we get the Centenes out of the middle of Kansas Medicaid, okay? Express Scripts is also a PBM, one of the 3 PBMs for Kansas Medicaid. So if we can get them out of the middle, guess what? It frees up more money. So we don't have to keep putting as many taxpayer dollars that are just going to the PBMs, which we can still take care of the providers and actually deliver more care to those Medicaid recipients that desperately need it. You know, you don't have to talk to Nate and I about needing Medicaid expansion. I think we need it. We desperately do. So there's things we don't agree with, but the PBM reform can really be the tip of the iceberg where now we can open up. Because again, those Medicaid programs, they're all administered by who? PBMs, okay? So. Another question?
We're gonna have to end here.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time, and I know, I guess we should allow the whole afternoon just to talk about this, because there's a lot of information here. Just an FYI, my wife is the president of our hospital auxiliary in El Dorado. She listened to Mike talk about 6 months ago, I believe, in the Butler County area, down in Wichita, in that area too. And she came home and she says, you need to go talk to him. And I can see why she was excited.
Well, thank you. Very passionate, but it's my life. You patients are my life. It's what we do and it's why we're here. And you know what? We're fighting hard. We're not going away, but we need help.
We have access on computer that we can put stuff, as Sherry gets that, she can share that with us. And feel free to ask him questions and find out. I'm sure he's got a card. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you all. Get there together. I'm actually really sure. I will send that presentation.
One of the things that I didn't do when we first started, and I just assumed, and Jeff reminded me, I don't know everybody, but I know faces. My name is Leroy Burton. I'm the speaker. Chuck Schmidt is the speaker pro tem. And we're glad to be here this week to be with you guys. We're here for questions, we're here for answers, so don't hesitate to ask. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chuck our next speaker, and we will proceed with our afternoon. There are drinks in the back if you want something.
Does this belong to anyone?
Thank you.
All right, fascinating, and sometimes there's so much information, it's hard to process it all. As Leroy said, I'm Chuck Schmidt, I'm from PSA 2 in Wichita, and I am the Speaker Pro Tem. A month or two ago, I was at an event for credit unions, and we had a presenter there who talked about scams and frauds. And I thought it was fascinating, and so we invited her here. So we are privileged to have Gail Bright. Gail is, she's retired now, but was with the state of Kansas credit union as an investigator. And most recently, she was, previously to that, she worked for Attorney General Carlos Stovall in the Attorney General's office. Gail is a licensed attorney, graduated from Washburn University School of Law. Her undergraduate degree was from Washburn University, and she is licensed to practice law in the state. She recently retired, but she's going to talk to us about scams and frauds. Gail Bright.
We just heard about scams and frauds. I know. Sorry. Okay. I was
Thank
trying
you,
to,
Doug. I tend to wander and I've been told I can only so far here. Back over here. You know, I guess I should be thankful that Chuck invited me here because we met in a downpour with softball size hail. Mother Nature heckled me through my whole program. So I'm grateful that today the sun has come out and we don't have to worry about that. So we're good.
yeah,
So,
sorry, go ahead.
okay, just give me a thumbs up when it pops up there.
Well,
Yes, I am 7 days retired from the state of Kansas. It's all very, thank you. 35 years legal career. I was with the state for almost 22 years through the 3 agencies. And I'm very passionate about frauds and scams. And I will tell you, it's not one incident that sent me down this path. I think it was a cumulative effect. I did work 5.5 years for Attorney General Stovall Protection Division. Part of what I oversaw as an assistant attorney general was related to telemarketers and contest sweepstakes. So you can imagine, yes, everybody who the targets were in that. And then I spent a little over 10 years with the Office of the Kansas Securities Commissioner, most of that as a prosecutor prosecuting securities fraud. Who do you think were the targets there? Yes, everybody's lying. And then I spent the last 6.5 years working for the Kansas Department of Credit Unions. And what I did was oversee the examination program. And I also worked for a credit union for 2.5 years. And so I've seen the impact from a variety of different ways. So what I want to do today is just kind of walk through
Maybe.
Well, we gotta get my disclaimer up there. I have a really long AI generated disclaimer that should pop up, but what it says is, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not yours. So whatever I say is my opinion. I couldn't say that 8 days ago. But I'm not giving you legal advice. If you have an issue, you need to seek counsel.
I mean, I have, there we go. Come on.
You need to hit the share button.
Well, it's,
Because it was up there a minute ago.
I know. Yes, this one.
Okay, you keep working, I'll keep talking.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
We had
I
trouble with
do
the
without
other one.
PowerPoint, so here we go. I can't do it without PowerPoint. We're gonna talk about 3 things. We're gonna talk about frauds, scams, and thieves, oh my. I have a really cool picture up there with the eyes. We're gonna talk about how to play defense with some of these. I think that's probably heard all my jokes, but, I always look out when I watch people and go, yeah, I don't think there's anybody here older than me. So you should apply. So, first of all, the movies are taking notice of this issue. Have you seen that? How many of you have seen The Beekeeper? Okay, if you're not into a lot of dead bodies, it's probably not the movie for you. But I pointed out because my boss, my former boss at the time, Administrator Julie Murray, this is also an important topic for her. She gave me the DVD and said, Gail, just watch the first 2 minutes. Okay. I ended up watching the whole thing. It's a Jason Statham action movie. Never seen one before. I lost track of the body count. As far as I can tell, they were all bad guys, so we're good. It starts with the premise of this elderly woman who goes through the classic computer gets hacked. The bad guys get her to log into her account and she loses $2 million straight right now. And you get to see the backside of this. You get to see her sitting in her computer and she gets that error message. Then she gets a login to her account. And the next thing you know, you flip the bad guys. Remember, I spent a lot of time in security. How many of you know what a boiler room is? Okay, it's like the back of town, today's version of a boiler room. You got walls of iPhone, you got walls of tablets, computers. There's 100 guys sitting in there with an MC and a tote board. Going, oh, there's another million. And so you're watching it drain out and go to the bad guys. Now, Jason Statham happens to be her attendant or something, and he gets really bad. And I mean really bad, and goes off on a tangent. So that was the premise for the movie. And Felicia Rashad is the actress who opens up with it. And I hate, you may not see it, so I'm gonna give you a spoiler alert. What happens to the character is not uncommon in this world. She commits suicide. Because she's lost the money. Part of it was a charity that she controlled. And so the money was gone, she didn't know what to do. And this is Jason's a 2-hour shoot 'em up kind of movie.
I don't know.
And then there's also the movie Thelma. I've not seen that. Is it good? Okay. Thelma is played by a 92-year-old actress, does her own stunts. She gets caught up in the grandparent thing, which we will talk about. From what I've heard, it's not realistic on how the money changes hands and how she gives it back, but it's a movie. Now, I will say, I talked to somebody who said there's a sequel to The Beekeeper and it's bad. So if you see a sequel, don't watch that. So what the point is, the movies are starting to pay attention because the individual who wrote Thelma had his grandmother go through something similar. So that prompted the movie. So, okay, there are a number of ways that they can steal your money. So let's start with one that's most common, the romance scam. How does that start? That's right. And where does it start? Online. Right. Because you just met somebody, and I'm going to age myself. I used to talk and train credit union staff, and I would say, your member comes in. They're really hurried because you know what they gotta do? Boyfriend. Oh, really? What does this boyfriend look like? So they whip out their phone, and there's a picture, and it's Brad. And we all know it's not true. But what are they looking for? Friendship, companionship. And really, I just saw, okay, I'm a card-carrying member of AARP. And one of the most recent magazines came out where there's a slight twist on this. How many of you are old enough to remember the Nigerian letter? Oh, sure. When I first started, I was talking about the Nigerian letter, and I mean the kind that's mailed with a stamp. Oh. Now we've all come this long way, so now there's a slight variation on the romance scam. It starts out with common interest, like maybe you're on a Facebook garden page. So somebody who's going to reach out to you because they're also a fellow partner And how are your tomatoes doing this year? So they build that common bond. And then it's not so much romance. It's like, man, I'm in a tough spot and I can't make my rent. Can you like give me, like, can I get $300? Multiply that by the number of people that they're connected to through this Facebook page. So just a slight twist, but part of it is companionship. And I remember using a video a long time ago where I think it was an area agency on aging in Wisconsin. Actually went to prison and interviewed the telemarketer. And what he said then is still true today. Because I get somebody on the phone and I get a call. Like if I'm talking to a guy on the phone and he mentions that he's gonna run off to the BMW. Oh, sir, are you a veteran? Yeah, I am. He goes, so am I. I served in Vietnam when you served World War II. So what do they got right there? We've got the common bond. And then they're just off and running. That still happens today, still happens online. The grandparent scam. Anybody know anybody who got caught up in one? How much did they lose?
They lost 13.
For that 13,000.
950.
950. The grandparent scam, they're gonna pose as a relative, there's gonna be that immediate financial need. Jail, hospital, rent, something. I actually had a credit union staff member tell me within the last year that they had a member who received an AI generated call that sounded like their grandson. Welcome to the new world of scams, AI. Don't get me wrong, I think AI can do wonderful things. It can also do bad things. Because there's gonna be people out there who wanna use it for bad things. And I'll share a story that, my former boss used to talk about, that her mother, and before her mother passed away, where she had lectured her, Mom, be careful, don't get caught up in this. And then one day her mother confessed to her, Julie, I got a phone call. It was Christian, who is Julie's oldest son. And he said he was in trouble. She goes, no, I was walking to get my debit card and I stopped. Something made me stop. And she goes, Christian, what's your dog's name? Where do you think that call went? Click, nowhere. I've also had people tell me that they called like their son and said, where's your son at? Oh, he's sitting right here. You mean he's not on the phone because he's in jail in Mexico? No. There is nothing wrong with double checking. Or money, that's right, yes. Tech support. How many of you got $5? That's okay, I won't tell. How many clicked? I will tell. Are you willing to share?
Yeah, thankfully my daughter, recovering from surgery, my daughter was down in the basement working from my house and I got this pop-up that said, stop. You know, you look very official, you've been hacked. And I tried to close it and all that wouldn't work. It said Microsoft support and I had a 1-800 number, which wasn't your normal, usual kind of 1-800 number. So I called and this friendly gentleman who didn't really give me much identifying information, said that if I would allow him to, you know, get inside my computer, which I did, that he could figure it out. Well, my daughter happens to walk upstairs at some point, but not before I had already was checking my bank account at his suggestion while he was working on the computer. So when my daughter came up, she said, hang up, which I did, but he'd already gotten like into my bank account, didn't get anything. But we, of course, we had to change, you know, stop it, cancel all this and that. But I learned my lesson.
Thank you for sharing. That takes bravery. Yes. So what is it they're trying to instill in you? Fear. There's something wrong with your computer. We're also dependent. How many of you have ever gone like a day without paying on a computer or your phone? Oh, good. I can say I've gone without being on the computer, especially now that I'm retired. But I can't go without being on the phone. Okay, government impersonator. Anybody ever got, well, you know, it's like, oh, did you realize that you didn't pay your taxes and you gotta pay us $900? Really, is the IRS gonna call you, particularly now? They're gonna threaten arrest, they're gonna threaten jail, they're gonna need the money now. And what's the piece of that gets you? Fear. They're making you scared, they're making you afraid. There's an article that I use when I train credit union staff, and it's written by a woman who's under 60, who lives in New York. She's a finance columnist for a magazine in New York. And she wrote an extensive article, I can't remember if it's the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, that talks about what happened to her. She got a phone call at 12:30 in the afternoon. And it was Microsoft or a tech support going, hey, did you buy these 2 Apple computers for $1,600? No, I didn't. Well, let me transfer you over to the FBI agent who's working this case. Yeah, probably. And she admits right up front that she's the reasonable, logical person that everybody calls. Yet she got sucked into it. So she gets to the FBI agent. Goes, yeah, well, let me hook you up with the CIA agent. So then we go to the CIA agent who has a badge number, who has this, who has that. And then she texts her husband. He's like, oh, whoa. Don't tell your husband. Why not? He's gonna talk right? You're under investigation for money laundering. You don't want to drag him in because then he's gonna get in trouble. Well, then she says something about calling a lawyer. Oh, whoa. Call a lawyer, we're all done here, we're gonna raid your house with your kids there, your husband's there, and it's all over. So they need 50,000 in cash. So tomorrow morning, you're gonna have a new social security number, you're gonna have this and do that, we're gonna cut you a check. Now, she did have a moment of clarity, she goes, why can't I do it for 50,000? Right? Oh, no, it's dirty. Okay. So there's a backpack in case she has to run. I mean, to bless her heart, she lays it all out, everything she did. And come 6 o'clock that night, she goes down and hands a box full of money to some guy in an SUV in front of her apartment building.
Oh my gosh.
And at 6:30, she tells the person this is a scam and hangs up. What time did they call? See if you're listening. What time did they call?
They call it 12:30.
They called at 12:30. She hung up at 6:30. That's what they do. They will keep you on the phone. There are some credit unions in the state who are using, and I spent my last 12 years in the credit union world, so that's why I use that as an example, where they have a laminated card that they'll slide to a member if they think they're on the phone, maybe in a purse. But they'll slide the card says, you know. There's actually been 1 or 2 where the person's nodding yes. They do. They're gonna keep you on the phone, keep you on the line. Oh, I got the blue screen of death.
Yeah.
All right. Sweepstakes lottery. Okay. How many of you have entered the PCH, Publishers Clearinghouse?
Mom.
How many of you won? You should play there. I got a call here 2 months ago. I think it was right before I met Chuck or right after. I won the Publishers Clearinghouse. I did. And it was also gonna give me like a new Mercedes, I think, too. All I had to do was call back. I recorded the message. I didn't call it back. I figure there's some karma, because who filed bankruptcy just within the last month? Publishers Clearinghouse. Pardon me, I have a little glee of that. I had the honor of suing them right before I left the Attorney General's office. Okay, you never have to pay your taxes when you win a lottery. But what's your first question when you're called and said you won? Did I enter? Used to happen a lot with the Canadian lottery. Did I enter? This is one that makes me sad. Family or caregiver. The majority of elder financial exploitation is done by a family member or a caregiver. I've seen more cases than I can count, where either a child, a grandchild, or a caregiver has taken money. And in one case out in western Kansas, it was the caregiver was the daughter of a good friend of the victim. I've seen cases where the son and daughter-in-law steal from the mother, and they're listed in a will as beneficiaries. I suppose it's better than killing them to get right away, but they just abuse the power of attorney. And that's why you will hear me say frequently, there's a special place in prison and hell for people like this, when they take advantage. There's a case in southwest Kansas where the great-great-grandmother was left to die by the great-grandchild that was down in the basement with her boyfriend. Had an aneurysm. The stories I can tell. Seen situations where a woman came into the credit union and wanted to check on the size of the safe deposit box, because a representative from the UN was going to deliver a suitcase full of cash to her. I kid you not. But at first she had to wire $6,000 to Atlanta. The address was like bank branch in Atlanta. So she had come in with a check from a friend. So the credit union worked had loss prevention officers who talked to her for hours, finally got her to say, okay, I won't do it. Well, in that instance, that's where I would monitor the account. I could tell you what happened without even knowing, because I watched it happen. I'm sure she got a phone call that night. Hey, Mrs. Evans, we didn't get your $6,000. What's the deal? Well, the bank, because people get confused with credit and banks. The bank told, well, of course they told. They don't want you to get this. Here's what you need to do. So they gave her due. So here's what I saw happen. Retirement money came in. And then she just went to a different branch and pulled out $6,000 in cash. And I can only assume went to Western Union, Walmart, somewhere, and just watched it drip out and wire it out. I do give Walmart props because I read recently that they've developed a good system to track an elder person who comes in and buys a whole bunch of gift cards.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're told to do, buy gift cards. So I give kudos to that. By the way, in case I didn't say it, ask a question, raise your hand. As we go along. I'm informal. Sometimes I know to throw candy at people, but sorry, I don't have any today. Okay, so how to play defense. So I'm telling you all these horrible stories, and I can tell you war stories. But how do you play defense? First of all, here's a suggestion: a code word. Establish a code word, a family code word. Now, I do have a paranoid friend who will tell you not to set up the code word on the phone. Pardon me? Yeah, I get it. Yes, but yeah, that she said, don't talk on the phone and set up the code word. Set up a code word, very similar to Julie's mother who said, what's your dog's name? Something that's not common. And I know that my children can look at the age of all of us. We were raised to be polite, weren't we? Okay, except for the lady in the front row over here. No. We were raised to be polite. Let me tell you, if you get one of these phone calls, hang up. It's okay. Because what are they gonna do? Call you back and you just don't answer. Best thing ever, caller ID. I still have a landline. And if I don't recognize the name, or if it's on my cell phone and you're not programmed in, I'm not talking to you. I've gotten calls from India. Might be curious, but no.
A lady friend of ours, Kansas Turnpike, sent her a text and it just scared her to death. So it took 3 or 4 of us telling her it's a scam, don't do anything. So they threatened to send the sheriff. And everyone.
I got that on my work phone. My state issued work phone, got the, K tag. I got one recently, I took a screenshot where my something about my Coinbase password. Okay, I don't own crypto. I don't know. But yeah, I've gotten one that like was offering me a job or something. No. Yes, sir.
This one arrived on my phone 20 minutes ago.
I've gotten this one too. It says, hello, long time no contact. I was so busy, I'm sorry. I thought of you recently. How are you? Is everything going well in your life? I got one that said, your number is in my contacts. Who are you?
Are those like what you just read? If you get one of those and you click on it, does that give you, or only if you follow up?
Yeah, if you follow up, because what I do is sometimes I don't even open it. It's the delete and report junk. I get such that. Blocks them. Sometimes I don't even do that. I'll just delete it and report them. So I do on phone calls. I'll block a phone call.
I was helping an elderly lady that, she was over 90. And she was getting scammed from someplace in Jamaica. And she had step by step written down what she was supposed to do. Drive to Dillon's, get a money order, drive back
Yes.
home,
What's that?
put an envelope, and wait for the gentleman to
Yeah,
show her.
We are, but
And
I don't know.
she was
We're
going to be
almost done
getting,
now.
jewelry.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Yeah.
And they called the house twice, I think, when I found out about it. And the second time I said, sorry, folks, your golden goose is
What?
Nice
not
job.
gonna be available anymore.
Nice job. I might just never have. It's
Did
really
you just
good,
log on?
but I want to delete it. I want it out on my phone quickly before it. does it.
Did you see
Yes.
the
But
link
how-
that things pop up
I
there?
listened to a great documentary and it was about the whole family.
Do I should read that?
The
Well, there were some
Philippines,
little leaves.
you
that
know,
come
not
up.
able to get good work and they were supposed to go to Thailand, but they took them over into the next country. And they are beat, they are not fed, they are not paid, and they are stuck there. And there is no government looking at that or helping those people out. So yes, they're on that, I mean, it sounds horrible, but they're in horrible situation too, some of them. You know, the girl, she was oldest in the family and she finally got her siblings out, but she can never go home. There is a price on her head. Yes. And so she can never go back to the Philippines. Correct, yes. That's almost like jumping ahead, so I was just rolling around in my head. Because what you're taught, how many of you are familiar with the term pig butchering? Pig butchering. That's like I've talked about individuals. Like there was a gentleman who got into a Facebook conversation with an Asian woman who lived in New York. And would you ask somebody to marry you that you've never met? So anyway, she needed some money so she could come live with him and they get married and all would be great and wonderful. But first, there's always but first. She had some money that her aunt was holding that he was gonna have to buy crypto so that she could get the money to come be with him and they would get married and the heavens would open and angels would sing. He cashed out all of his retirement. He lost it all. And he was actually looking to get a loan to pay her more when he got a phone call from an FBI agent. And what they call it pig butchering. It's a rather inartful term because you're basically a hog being led to slaughter. Because they're, they build the interest, they build love, they send you a picture of God knows who and ain't them. And you're being led, and all of a sudden, they get to that point, like this guy did. Okay, but wait, there's always something else. And so it's called pig butchering. And there's been a couple of articles recently where you are correct. It's likely the individual who's cultivating the relationship, first of all, it ain't correct, is sitting in Thailand in a warehouse with 500 people in deplorable conditions, and they must do it or their family is going to get killed, beaten, or whatever. Podcasts. I just found one. Only listened to part. The podcaster is a woman named Erin West, and she is the founder of Shamrock. And her mission in life is to uncover this. And I just saw on LinkedIn this morning, still looking on LinkedIn, find more, but somebody was sharing a post from the Gander International Airport. Jenny, is that Nova Scotia? Canada. Yeah, Canada. Where now they're seeing older individuals come to the airport dressed. I can say this because I'm an older people. How do women dress when they're going like to town? Nice dress. Nice dress, hose, hat, gloves, all that. They're seeing women like that come to the airport expecting somebody to arrive. And it's sad because you don't know how much money they've lost already. Another story I had read where a woman who was in her late 40s had been a backup singer for some well-known artists. Her husband had passed away. She met a guy on Facebook who, strangely enough, looked a lot like her late husband. Corresponded a lot. He was coming from Australia. He had more stories that I could make up. Like he tried to come, but he got stopped by security, and then he got attacked by this, and everything delayed. And finally, he's supposed to arrive in Las Vegas. She decided she'd spend one more bit of money to pay for a ticket to Las Vegas from wherever he's at, Australia. So she actually goes to the Las Vegas airport, waiting, and she gets a text from him. Hey, been caught up in TSA. So what does she do? She trots over to TSA. He's not there. Millions of dollars down the drain. So they're going to take advantage, like I said. It's a good place for these people. So don't be afraid to tell someone. Please don't be afraid to tell someone. Because you may think you're the only one. This nice lady here was brave enough to talk. I'll bet there's somebody else in this room. Don't be afraid to tell someone, anyone. We used to, how many of you are members of credit unions? I think you're talking about credit unions. Credit unions know their members, right? I'm now out of range. Good. They know their members. And if you have a faithful member who has a teller they always go to, who are they going to tell? That teller. You may have 5 people in line, but that person's going to come up to you because they trust you. They've built that trust. Now, granted, we have to talk about the weather, flowers, the Chiefs. Oh, Lord, don't get me started. And then we're going to come around to where they're going to lean in. They're going to go, can I tell you something? And that's when they're going to tell someone. Because I don't know how many people I've talked to who think they're the only one. You are not. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So please tell someone. If you had an issue, go to your financial institution, get some blocks on the accounts, change the password, do something. Proceed with caution. I decided, I had a couple of things pop up my phone, and I decided what it was. It's because when you get to scrolling, I won't tell you which one news site does, it's because they'll stick ads in there. And as I'm scrolling, my finger might hit an ad. And something weird opens, and I close it, like, oh no. So now I'm more careful. Not scrolling. So proceed with caution, you get that pop. Turn it off. Something else, if you think your computer's been infected, don't just turn it off, unplug it. Unplug it from the internet, unplug it from the electricity, unplug it. So that there's no further damage done.
Have you seen much with the helplines? Like my father-in-law, he just moved into a different place, and so he couldn't get his Siri or his Alexa to work. And so he was trying to get on his laptop to do it, because it said you had to download the app or something. Anyway, I came in, and while I was there, he was on the phone with somebody, and I said, "What are they asking you?" And he handed me the phone, and it was this lady said, "Well, can you go to this website?" And it didn't make sense. And so I started to go to it, and I said, "Wait a minute, what does this website do?" And she said, "Well, I can get in the computer and fix it for you then." And I said, "No, you're a scam," and I just hung up. And I told him, "Don't ever go to click on those ever again."
That's what we refer to in the biz as a red flag. You think your phone's listening? Alexa is listening. I do not have one, I won't have one. And I have,
This popped up from him looking for something else on his computer. It popped up, so he called that number. It was a helpline.
it's not so much the helpline is the problem, it's the fake websites. Because, AMAZEN.com. Is that the right? No. Question?
One of the things that, and I've got caught a couple of times on this, when I'm looking for something like, for instance, recently I had rented a car, I had reserved a car. And I wanted to double check, and so I got on the computer and I just typed in the name of the car company and didn't really look, and I went to the first one that came up. And the guy started telling me he was going, I had to give him my credit card number and everything, and I knew right away, oh my God, and I looked and I had the wrong one. So that happens a lot. You may be looking for Hertz rental car, but that may be about 4 or 5 down on the contacts that you get on your computer.
Yeah, you can pay Google to be at the top of the list, and I've already served a bad guy, pay to be at the top of the list.
I'm wondering about the more mundane, everyday, which seem to be scams, the email. I get flooded with emails like, pretend you be the post office. We cannot deliver this because your information is not complete. Or your order is on the way from whatever, Best Buy, Harbor Freight. They pose as every retailer under the sun. It's on the way. Or it's just there's dozens of variations on, if you did not make this order, click on this.
PayPal, right.
Is there any way to kind of screen these out?
Well, here's how I do it, although I have, email through AT&T. And if I roll over the sender, it may say it's from, let's see, it may say that it's from the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. But if I roll over, I'm going to see the email address, and it's going to be 5624788JWZ@RU. So that's a way to tell, is to look at the address that it's coming from. Because it may be slightly off, like I said, Amazon could be AMAZEN. And if you're in a hurry and you're just clicking on it, you're in trouble. Yes, sir.
This has been very helpful in recognizing scams, but when I surveyed the senior community where I live, half of the residents there said email scams, phone scams. How can we prevent them? Or is it a situation like a rainy day where we just have to endure it and count on it being sunny tomorrow?
Yeah, I can always tell when my stuff's been sold. Now I have, it's not endorsement, I have LifeLock. I can tell when my stuff's been sold because I get a rash of junk emails. I'm like, oh, somebody bought my stuff. Or I'll get phone calls or text messages and then it'll calm down. At this point, I think it's so pervasive, I'm not sure how you stop it. Ask me at the end what I might offer as a suggestion. Don't jump ahead. Research, use an independent source. Like if you get something with a helpline on it, don't use that. Go actually type in the real website. Call your friend and go, hey, can you log into your computer and tell me, what this does? Because if there's a way to get you, they will. And I know from experience that once you're hooked and you're in, they're gonna come until the piggy bank's dry. I mean, today it's I can't pay my rent, tomorrow my car broke down. And you multiply that by the 100 people that they're friends with on this Facebook garden group. And that's pretty, I could kick back and do this retirement thing. I don't think I could do that. Okay, next slide, please. Trusted contacts. Has anybody heard about that? On the back. Trusted contact. I first saw from the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and then also the NCUA, which is the National Credit Union Administration, has talked about it. There are some credit unions in the state who are doing it, or at least offering it to their members. I haven't, like I said, I haven't been in the bank world for 400 words to credit union, to know how many banks are doing it. It's just giving your financial institution, and of course there's a sign, you have to sign authority to call a friend. It's like phone a friend. This individual has zero access to your accounts. None. Zippo. It's just somebody, it could be a coffee buddy. And I may say, Mary is my coffee buddy. So I come in one day and I'm withdrawing like my entire bank account, I want it in cash, and I want a check made out to, I don't know, the Joker or the Penguin. And then my financial institution could call Mary and go, Gail came in here with this weird request, is she okay? So Mary doesn't know the specifics, but she can say, I can check or I'll talk to her later. Coffee buddy, card buddy, garden, somebody that you trust that will see you on enough regular basis that you can do, that they can check with you and see. So like I said, they don't have access to your personal information, your first PII, your personal identifying information, accounts, none. Yes.
One of the things that we push to the seniors in our area a lot, even numbers that you recognize, because they have access to every number because they're computer generated. And like Leroy just said, probably some of you have been called by yourself. So in other words, don't trust the fact that it's a Beloit number or whatever. Especially with Silver Haired, I get quote calls from all over the state of Kansas. What we stress to people is your best friend is your not caller ID, but your message at the end of the phone call. If somebody calls you and you just don't answer and it goes to message, if it's a legitimate friend, a legitimate person, they will leave a message and then you can call them back if you recognize. And even then, if it's not one you recognize, don't call them. But you got to remember, these folks are unbelievably skilled with verbal message. They are unbelievably skilled. If they can get you to answer, the chances of them getting into your pocketbook just skyrocket. And so if you just don't answer, it's my sister lost $30,000 because of the one that popped up alert, 3 days later, she's out $30,000.
Then they called us and she hadn't said 5 words. And we said, wow, that's a scam. We thought that, you know, that was ahead of time. For all no, she'd already lost the money. So don't get them on the phone. If they are legitimate, they will leave a message. And if they, most of the time they don't, and the ones that do leave messages now, it's a joke message. It's laughing like a horse or something.
However, I did win the published clearinghouse. Okay, so. Okay, just earlier this year, AARP came out with a new campaign. Pause, reflect, protect. So you get one of those phone calls, take a moment to pause. Do I really know this? Did I really enter this lottery? Do I know this person? Reflect on it and then protect by not doing it. So I thought that was a really good message to get out there. AARP has a lot of good anti-fraud stuff. Trust but verify. That's how I live my life. Trust but verify. Because there's so much new stuff out there. How many of you have used a QR code? Okay, how many of you know what a QR code is? Let's start there. How many have used one? Oh, those are
Not good.
the new horizon. Because let's say that, you know, you decide you're gonna ride the bus. And once at the bus stop, a bench, what's on the bench? An ad. And a QR code. How do you know that that QR code was put there by the advertiser?
Yes.
How do you know that they didn't plaster over it?
Hmm.
I got a letter in the mail. I knew it was a problem when I looked at it because it was addressed to my name or my father's name. My father's been gone for 18 years. Now, you can do free people search and find out almost everything about me. It doesn't say they're dead, but it's my parents' names. And I open it up and it's from a religious organization, not one of which I have a member. And contained within it is a little card. And the only thing on the card is a QR code. And I went, yeah, no. I've seen them on tables in restaurants. But if you notice, when you put your camera hovers over a QR code, it'll tell you where you're going. So you might take a look at that. But those are the new horizon right behind artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
You know, I talked earlier, I think artificial intelligence can do great things. Probably ought not cheat on your next college exam with it. But it's great in the world of financial institutions for looking for fraud and transactions, so forth and so on. But as with all things, the bad guys, rather than getting a good job that pays money, they want to do bad things. So they're using AI to generate voices. How many of you put a video with sound on social media? How many of you don't want to admit? If you put a video on social media with your voice, what have you just done? They can take that snippet and develop a whole conversation. Remember, I've already heard from a credit union that they had a member receive an AI generated phone call that sounded like her grandson. Say it with me, prison and hell. Okay. All right, so I guess next. So what to do? You were asking whether or not we just wait out the rain. I'm not sure we can because it is global. It is international. And I mean, I've been breached so many times I've lost track. AT&T, MGM, I'm still waiting my $5, by the way, from AT&T. MGM. I mean, it's been a long laundry list. Speaking of Ronald Reagan, 6 years ago, I was in the Ronald Reagan Library and I broke my ankle. And so I went to the local hospital. Now, this was a gift that keeps on giving, because about 6 months later, I got a notice from the hospital that said, guess what? We've been breached. So I spend the money, I mean, whatever choice you do, I spend the money to do Norton and LifeLock. Because everything is out there and it's hurting. Here's some suggestions I have just globally, stop it, I'm sorry. If I had the answer to that, I would not have been a state employee for 22 years. I think first of all, we have to change the narrative. Because I had, one of my last speeches, I had a woman come up to me, broke my heart. Because she said she lost $90,000 of 120 that she had. Helping her grandson, who she thought was in a foreign mess overseas. The money all went overseas. Now, she did go to law enforcement, and I highly recommend you go to law enforcement. Because you may only have one piece, but somebody else might have the other piece. And by the time it funnels to law enforcement, through a suspicious activity report, you may be able to put something together. So she's telling me this. I said, and she goes, I was so stupid. No, we need to change the narrative. I said, you're not stupid, you're a victim. And I know there's worry, because if you're independent and something happens, you don't want to tell your family, because you don't want that independence taken away from you. But you're victims, and what is happening to you is a crime. It's not just something, oh man, I fell for a scam. You're a victim of a criminal, it's a crime. Remember nothing else about this. The second thing is education. Education of like this, education with financial institutions, education with law enforcement. I know from experience that some of the small county attorneys and local district attorneys don't have the staff at the time. But I also know that they've told people that there's no reason to file a complaint. No reason to file a report. That we can't find. But it's a small piece of the puzzle. It'll make you feel better that you've done something proactive. And then the third thing is something that I can provide education. And this is something I will continue to do in retirement because I'm that passionate about. But also back to the law enforcement resources. This is a global epidemic in the billions of dollars every year lost. They don't have the staff. Probably you're gonna find that nothing against small cities, small towns, small counties. They don't have the staff to track it down. There's also the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is operated by the FBI. Financial institutions will file suspicious activity reports, which they give as much information as they have. And then law enforcement does look at those, and you can put it together to find a prosecution.
You said that's.
Wow, that's a lot. I could have talked for another hour because I've got all kinds of stories to tell you about what's happened to people. So, questions? More questions, gripes, bitches.
I just had, I work for our local government, and so, I don't know, a few years ago, they were hacked and they had to shut us down. Now we have this super cybersecurity team that works diligently. But nowadays, they send us tidbits every week. Today happened to be one of those tidbit days in our emails. And so I just was gonna share that one tidbit. When you mentioned the QR code and if you put it up, and of course you can see the website that you're going to, it's the same when you're in emails and you see those links. If you just hover your mouse over the link without clicking it, you can definitely see the email where the, the web address where you would be going. And a lot of them are very noticeable if you would just read before it goes, dots where they don't misspell words and dashes and.
Yes, that's like the dead giveaway, because I'll get an email from Lowe's, capital L, dash, capital O, little w, Really, is that the Lowe's marketing department these days?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Why would that not be put on our website? Anything you can provide and put on our website, we really appreciate
The
it.
PowerPoint,
Okay,
go on there, I'm trying to think of. who might have some good fraud stuff.
Does it help to get LifeLock and all those? It doesn't help at all.
I haven't lost any money yet. It's people, I think it's caught some stuff as far as viruses go. LifeLock is if I do lose money through having my identity, stolen, haven't had to use it yet. For me, it's peace of mind. I mean, I'm very careful. I think I sent some emails from the federal government to the spam when I worked for this. It's like, this looks so bad. So I'm uber careful. But for me, it's just peace of mind.
My father-in-law has 3. And I keep trying to tell him, one should be enough.
One would be enough, yes,
Well,
yes.
thanks again, I appreciate it. We're gonna take 10 minutes, but before we do that, Paula gets 15 seconds.
Thank you. I wanted to tell you that, we're doing really well on the 50/50 pot. We have $390 in there right now. Our goal was to get $400, so now we're gonna raise the goal to 500. If you win, you're gonna get $250 to take home tomorrow night at the banquet. Do any of you still have silent auction items? We have 125 items in the holding room. Does anyone else have a silent auction item? Good. Are any of you who have not told me bringing a lawmaker to the banquet tomorrow night? Please hold your hand up and I'll come talk to you. Okay, I have everybody down. Was that 15
Okay,
seconds?
we'll take 10 minutes. And then I'll give.
And just quickly, oh, I'm sorry, and just quickly at 3 o'clock, we're gonna have one of your favorite subjects. It will be about property tax. So be back here about 3 o'clock, we'll get started. Thank you.
Together.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have
Let's gather back up again for our next presentation. So please work your way back to your tables. Thank you.
Place and thinking, I mean, I thought it was not that. I didn't think about looking at that until late. Oh, I forgot. It's cold.
Sure. Yeah, I'll send that over there, probably this evening. I think that's gonna be in a 1 page or about tax on everything. Appreciate that. Glad you came out. Yeah, I know. She wants to.
Okay, let's get back to our seats and, for our next presentation.
Yeah.
We're getting inundated with so much information.
Nathan?
My brain can't handle it all. I'm sure the rest of you can handle it, but, at any rate, we talked a lot about property tax. We've been talking about that for a while. That became a very important issue when we had our annual meeting in July. And so I immediately called a friend of mine who is, I met while I was in the legislature. He's probably the most knowledgeable person in the state of Kansas about budget, property tax and taxes in general. And I asked him to come here. He said, I can't do it. He said, I'm overbooked, but I can give you a name. And when he gave me that name, I knew this is somebody else we're talking about because he learned under the master. So the person we have speaking today is Nathan Kessler, who is a principal economist at Kansas Action for Children. He has a bachelor's and a master's degree in economics from Emporia State University and worked in the Department of Labor as a labor economist. In his role at Kansas Action for Children, he's primarily responsible for the organization's work on state tax policy, but also leverages his expertise to produce publications covering a wide range of economic issues. But something that I'm really proud of Nathan is that he's a graduate of Independence High School. I happened to be privileged to be superintendent of schools in Independence during the time he was there. And I always loved to see kids who graduated doing something important. So I give you Nathan Kessler.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me here to talk about what I'm told is one of your favorite subjects. No side that favoritism is, but hopefully today you'll get something of value out of some information I've brought for you here today, and I'll be around tomorrow as well to provide some testimony on property taxes. There may be a little bit of additional content there. Okay, so
we'll go ahead and get started, and I do have
Get
a
that.
nice slideshow for you. I think it's nice anyway. And it's actually from a series we have. That's why it says tax policy, education, we do income, all that sort of stuff. So as was said, I'm Nathan Kess. I'm the principal economist at Kansas Action for Children. I work on a variety of issues, but taxes is pretty much my bread and butter there. Today, we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to pretty much start with a holistic overview of what property taxes are, who pays, who benefits, just sort of just a general overview. And then we're going to get into some of the different methods by which states have tried to offer property tax relief. Some good, some not so good. And so we'll get into some of the fun stuff towards the end, but I've got to drag you through the mud first. Okay, so first we're going to start with some terminology, and that is going to be appraised value, assessed value, mill levy, and ad valorem tax. Now, the appraised value is just the market value of a home, the standard value that you would think if you were going to sell or purchase a home. The assessed value is a little bit more complicated. So that is the taxable value of the property, which is gotten to by taking the appraised value times 11.5%. And now just to make it a little bit more complicated for you, when it comes to the 20 mills that the state levies, that's actually your appraised value minus the first $75,000, and then 11.5% of that. So it's no wonder that people hate this whole system. Mill levy is just the unit by which property is taxed. 1 mill is equal to 1/10 of a penny. And finally, an ad valorem tax is a tax levied according to the value, in this case, the home's value, as opposed to something levied per unit, like with a pack of cigarettes or something like that. Now, property taxes are a critical source of revenue for local governments. And as much as none of us like them, we do have to pay them. They're here to stay, most likely. Because local governments are unable to raise money in the ways that the states can, states can levy income taxes, they can do all sorts of different things to sort of stimulate revenue, but local governments just don't have that option. So they rely on property taxes and, to a lesser extent, sales taxes in order to provide all the services that they do. So this right here is a property tax bill. It's my property tax bill. And in Shawnee County, anybody can just go online and look these up, and you can get a sense of sort of who you're paying property taxes to and how much you're paying to that entity. I'm sure in many of your counties, they have a similar thing. I doubt all counties do. I'm sure that this isn't costless to run. But if we look at this, you can see here that the school district, county, and the city represent the lion's share of these taxes. So with the city, it's kind of blurry up there, so I'll sort of just break this down for you a little bit. The city of Topeka levies about 36 mills, about 37, and in my case that came up about $323. The county levies about 48 mills, another $425, and the school district, US 501, levied an additional 44.5 mills, and that was another $292. And then there are a few miscellaneous taxes on there that, also add up to the full bill. Every non-exempt property in the county pays these taxes. So, while some of these are smaller, some of them are quite large, and that has a huge impact on homeowners, especially fixed income seniors.
The next one.
All right. So while you didn't see it on the previous slide, the state government levies a 20 mil levy. This is used to fund schools in Kansas, or partially. Of course, the schools themselves also levy their own option, their local option budgets, what that's called. And you didn't see that on the previous slide. One, because it's actually wrapped up in the school finance or the school levies. So where it's at 44 for USD 501, 20 of those were actually the statewide mill levy. The statewide mill levy came about from the 1992 school finance law. This essentially standardized property taxes for school finance across the state. previously, property taxes for school finance were all over the place, one example is that. Burlington, New Strong area had a really low property tax because they had the nuclear power plant, whereas other areas were just exorbitantly high. So this law sort of leveled that playing field and required all non-exempt properties sort of have some skin in the game on public schools. It wasn't always 20 mills and has declined over time, but that's where it stands now. And interestingly enough, this mill levy is actually not permanently in statute. It has to be renewed every 10 years. Previously, the courts had determined that the only permanent levy that the state could issue was the 1.5 mils for state and educational and institutional building funds. This last year, the Kansas legislature is eliminating that 1.5 mils, and that will be effective next tax year. So still on there this year, I'm sorry to say. I mean, I'd be just as happy to have that $20 this year as next year. Right. Okay, so as I said, the bulk of the property taxes are paid to local governments. These taxes vary significantly across different communities based on the size and value of the tax base there. So, for example, I mentioned Burlington, New Strong area with the Wolf Creek Power Plant. Because that plant pays so much in property taxes, the residents end up paying a little bit less. And because of the smaller tax base, they could probably be paying even less if there were more people there. But the revenue raised at the local level is important no matter where you're at or who's paying it, because it's used to provide services and infrastructure that we all use. So we think about public schools, roads, police, fire services, everything that we need is provided as a public good thanks to property taxes. And there are several other entities that rely on property taxes for funding, and then primarily public schools, as we saw in that one example, but also things like your local library or the public universities in an area. So Washburn, Emporia State, K-State, KU, Pittsburgh State, all of these universities rely on public money. These services provide people with education, transportation, internet, all these things that we need that would not be a public good were it not for property tax. Instead, we would have toll roads and we would have privatized police. So it is really an important source of revenue at the local level. Now, as for who pays, that's virtually everybody. I don't think I have to tell all of you. And many of us pay it directly for our homes, businesses, land, or even our vehicles. All of that is subject to property taxes. But even renters indirectly pay property taxes on their home, as those taxes are often factored into the rent prices. So we're all pretty much on the hook for this. There are several exempt entities, which we are going to get to, but I would bet you that people who work at those exempt entities pay some property taxes in some form or another. So as for those exempted entities, primarily the ones that come to mind right off the top of the head are government and religious institutions. These organizations are exempt from property taxes. While they don't pay them, it can get pretty complicated though, honestly, right? So while a church may not pay property taxes, some organization that it owns might. So this is really a very complicated system that we're all just trying to navigate, including those exempt entities. Other ones that are included in this are public schools and universities and certain nonprofits. So this is the nonprofits, again, another one where it gets kind of complicated. So nonprofits that operate primarily as charities, education, or religious institutions don't pay property taxes. But then organizations like my own probably do if we own any property we rent. So I guess we pay those indirect taxes, right? Now we get to the who benefits. I've been sort of harping on these services this whole time, and I'm going to go ahead and do it one more time, just for everybody's benefit. The services funded by property taxes are generally enjoyed by everybody. That's roads, bridges, parks, schools, police and fire services, and even elections. are all made possible because of property taxes. If that money were to dry up, then those services would likely dry up for those that are not able to independently pay. So you sort of, you can start to see that property taxes are almost a form of investment in one's community. That doesn't mean that paying them is fun. While the services property taxes fund are important, that doesn't mean we want to pay, but we want those services, right? So the challenge then becomes balancing, having those services and not overpaying for them, which I think sometimes we all get the sense that we're stuck doing. And this is not a new feeling, actually. This particular political cartoon is actually from the 1970s, when there was a major property tax revolt as a result of standardizing valuations and tax systems. So the key that I want you to take away from this slide is that we've been dealing with this for a long time, and that knee-jerk reactions should really be avoided. Lawmakers should really focus on targeted, sustainable relief and broadening that tax base. All right, so we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about a few states that have addressed property tax concerns using different methods, and hopefully we can learn a little something from them. Okay, so tax and expenditure limitation, also known as TELS, which I might be using over the rest of this conversation, and I don't mean my poker face. So these tax and expenditure limitations are restrictions on growth in government spending and or revenue. Some focus on just one side, some focus on both. We're going to see a little bit of both of those sides. Several of these were introduced in the 70s after the valuation and taxing systems were standardized. And these can be effective for preventing tax increases, no doubt. But ultimately, they can put states in challenging situations. The first tax and expenditure limitation we're going to talk about is known as Proposition 13. Has anybody ever heard of Proposition 13?
California?
Yep, California, that's right. Yep, we're going to start there. Proposition 13 is an assessment limit. It essentially restricts valuation increases, so that assessed valuation specifically, restricts that to 2% annually, except in the case of a transfer of ownership of that property. This is one of those TELs that is a product of the 1970s property tax revolt and was implemented through voter initiative in I believe it was the late 70s. This measure has been highly distortionary and has led to some pain in the California housing market. Currently, they have a homeownership rate of about 55.3%. So it's extraordinarily low. In Kansas, it's much higher, around 67%. So while it was initially intended to be a good thing, too much of a good thing can be bad. And we're going to see why on this next slide. This is an example, and maybe not so extreme considering, housing prices in California, but this is an example of 3 homes owned by Warren Buffett. And it perfectly illustrates the pitfalls of measures like Proposition 13. So what we see here is that Mr. Buffett had bought a home with a market value of $4 million in 2003. He bought the home in the early 70s. He has another property just adjacent to that one, same exact neighborhood. He can see it from the window of either one, he can see the other. And it has a market value half that of the first one, but it was bought in the mid-1990s. And so when we look at that, despite having half the market value, Warren Buffett paid nearly 6 times the amount of property taxes on that home he bought in the 90s. And that was simply because of when he bought the home. The one he owned in the 70s, all the way up through 2003, the assessed valuation had been arbitrarily kept low. Whereas when he purchased the one in the 90s, there was a reevaluation, a reassessment, and now all of a sudden he owes a boatload of money in tax. Well, not a boatload for him, but he owes a whole lot more, right? And then if we look at a home he owns in Omaha, has a market value of just $500,000. The property taxes on that one are even higher than on the $2 million home in Laguna Beach. And so what we see is that this distortion really causes like a major headache in the real estate market. So let's think a little bit about how this plays out over time, right? Let's say somebody buys a home for $100,000 and they have their really low assessment rate locked in. The home appreciates in value, their appraised value, but their assessed value is held low. When they want to sell that house to move or to downsize, whatever their reason is based on their stage in life, who's gonna buy that? Knowing that they are gonna have to then take on all that additional valuation growth and pay those property taxes. And, you know, sure, somebody goes in eyes wide open on something like that. Maybe they're fine with that. But then the person selling that home also has to buy a new home. And they are gonna have trouble finding one that they wanna take on that valuation growth on. And so it creates this lock-in, lock-out effect that I think has been super critical to the pain we're seeing in the California housing market. You know, specifically, you're seeing population decline in California after decades of massive population expansion, but now nobody can get a house they can afford because of years of underbuilding and this distortion. The other one that I want to talk about today is Colorado's TABOR, or the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Who's heard of that? A few less people, but that's okay. I'm gonna tell you all about it today. So TABOR was adopted in 1992, sort of a break from that 1970s property tax bill. I think this was just a general tax revolt altogether. So this limits how much money can be spent or retained by the state government. Excess revenues are then distributed back to taxpayers as a sort of a dividend. Proponents of these kinds of policies applaud their check on government growth and argue that they democratize tax policy. But there's a downside to these as well. Super restrictive policies like TABOR ultimately tend to result in severely underfunded public services, because in cases like this, costs tend to rise faster than revenues are allowed to grow. And I think we see that a lot in the public sector. Costs to run a city or a county or a state tend to grow even faster than costs overall. And that's just sort of the way that it shakes out, unfortunately. And so when you restrict revenue severely, here's what happens. TABOR led to some severe negative impacts in Colorado in its first 10 to 12 years. Education spending as a percent of personal income fell sharply. Colorado had to actually suspend its childhood vaccination program briefly because it just couldn't afford the vaccines. The share of low-income children without insurance doubled from 1992 to 2005, despite increasing in the nation more broadly. And Colorado ultimately received a credit downgrade in 2002. California voters ultimately voted to suspend TABOR for 5 years in 2005, actually, to get their fiscal house back in order. Of course, that was made more complicated by a crushing economic recession just 3 years later. And to this day, Colorado remains the only state to have adopted a policy as restrictive as TABOR. Slide. So an alternative to these draconian tax and expenditure limitations are circuit breakers. Most states have some form of circuit breaker. We have our homestead property tax credit, the safe senior credit, and some of these others that are, you know, more recent in nature. But one state stands out above the rest, and we'll get to that state in just a minute. First, I want to talk about what circuit breakers are generally. Circuit breakers are tax credits meant to limit the share of income a target demographic spends on property taxes. They can come in a couple different forms. Some of them want to look at the percent of income spent on property taxes and keep people under that percentage of their annual income. Others want to do a hard cap. You won't spend more than this amount on property taxes. There are a number of ways. That's one of the great things about them is they're very flexible in how they can be designed. These programs provide targeted relief to those most in need and have incredible flexibility in their design. As I just said, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. However, they can also become pretty expensive very quickly. And so that's sort of the drawback of these programs. Michigan is the gold standard in terms of circuit breaker programs, in my personal opinion. Qualifying individuals can claim a refund of up to $1,700 for 60% of income that exceeds 3.2% paid towards property tax. So let me try to say that another way. It's just a lot of numbers all at once. So if you pay more than 3.2% of your annual income on property taxes, you can claim a refund for up to 60% of that difference for a maximum of $1,700. That's general. People with disabilities and low-income seniors can actually claim 100% of that difference between 3.2 and whatever they end up paying towards. It is still for that max of $1,700, which, you know, depending on your situation, may be a whole lot. If you have a $1 million home, it might not be so much. Yeah, next slide. Renters are also included in this program. I think 23% of their rent as quote unquote property taxes, which sort of harkens back to when I said earlier that renters indirectly pay these taxes through higher rents. The eligibility for this credit phases out when how they designated total household resources. It's essentially just total household income, whether it's individual, family, just however much is the total income. When that exceeds $67,300, eligibility for the credit is you no longer eligible. And houses with a value greater than $154,400 are also ineligible. And these are adjusted annually for inflation. And now looking at that house value, you know, in today's market, that doesn't seem like a whole lot. But again, that's one of the really great things about circuit breaker programs is that they can be designed to fit the needs of a state. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm a huge proponent of these sorts of programs. I'd like to see, you know, the legislature take up this sort of programs, more broadly expand our existing program, make it a little more generous. I think that that could go a long way. And that's actually my last slide, but I have a little bit more that I'm going to sort of dig into here. So while circuit breakers are a great tool for getting money back to people, sustainably lower property taxes is only going to be achieved through rebalancing our housing market. Without more supply, valuations will continue their runaway growth, and property taxes will soar right along with them. So this is an issue that to solve in the long term is going to take cooperation at the local, state, and federal level. And it's also going to require the cooperation of residents. I mean, have any of you heard about NIMBYism? Mm-hmm. Not in my backyard. To an extent, I get it, right? But if we're serious about sustainably lower property taxes, we gotta build. We've been underinvesting in housing since the financial crisis. We overinvested for a few years before that, but now it's time the tides have turned, and if we don't get some more housing for people, then we're all going to continue to pay the price. And now we can do some questions. Get at what you really want to know.
So, the last paragraph, where you talked about the cap, Sherry, can you go back to that slide for everyone? This cap, I think is what, 154,000 in Michigan?
Yeah.
The problem with Kansas is that people's home values can get up there, and that may not be at all what you paid for that house, but you get quicker, you get over that cap, but you're still struggling trying to pay the tax if you're a senior.
Sure.
So do you think there is the ability, hopefully, that they can try to look at those caps and raise them?
So, you know, I think there are a couple of opportunities there. You know, one, we can look at the median home value and then determine eligibility based on some level of that. So, you know, if you want to go 120% or 80% of the median home value, that's one option. Another option is that instead of looking at this from an appraised value, we could look at it from an assessed value. And, you know, if somebody's, so, I mean, if let's just say, I want to try to make my math easy. somebody's home's worth $300,000, their assessed value would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 33,000. And if we wanted to look at, say, somebody having an assessed value under 50,000, right? And then so only people with like really expensive homes aren't going to be getting this credit. That's another possibility. I think assessed value could work out pretty well.
Two-part question. You mentioned that you would like to see more homes built. Is that an indication that home ownership as a percentage is declining? And secondly, can you explain, it's related, but rent control that we hear so much about in concentrated urban areas?
Yeah, sure. So we have seen declining homeownership over time. Definitely as more people are looking for housing, more people have aged into that sort of stage in their lives, and we just don't have the housing to be bought. We've definitely seen an uptick in renters. What that's a factor of is hard to say, whether people are unable to afford a house or whether they're unable to find a house. So that is probably going to be different based on even where you live. As for rent control, I mean, generally speaking, it's not economically advisable. A lot of times what rent control can lead to is the proliferation of what are slumlords, where they just don't have incentive to upkeep the property because their rents are being artificially low. Are there some extreme cases where maybe that's not such a bad option, say with like New York City, where rent can easily get up to $3,000, $4,000 per month? That's tough to say. I'm glad I'm not running for mayor of New York. But I don't think that would be something that Kansas probably needs to look at. Instead, we could return renters back to the homestead credit, which they were in prior to the tax cuts back in 2015, around that era.
It is on. I got into a conversation the other day with somebody that says that's trying to tell me that churches do pay a property tax. And we went from property taxes on churches, tax relief that they're non-exempt, whatever, to the mega churches. You only touched on that very lightly, and this has come up in several conversations from my point of view. So what do you have to say on that?
Sure. So, yeah, churches are statutorily exempt from, I believe, all taxes, honestly, in the state. So property sales, and I mean, ostensibly, they don't have income in the same way that a for-profit company does. So they are exempt from property taxes. But as I said, this can get a little bit complicated because, say, like those mega churches, as a good example, the enterprises that they own, they're sort of spun off companies, those might be subject to taxation. So if they are selling merchandise, say in their lobby, which would probably need to be separate from the actual church itself, that could be taxed because at that point they are selling that merchandise to me. So depending on where the enterprise is located and what the enterprise is engaged in, churches can pay taxes on some of their deals.
But not on property as church itself.
Correct. The church itself would not pay property taxes.
Two questions. First, seems like if you're paying a certain amount of tax and you're retired, your income does not come up. It remains the same. And they either raise the tax levy or they raise the value of the house. I don't know, what can we as Silver Haired legislatures, what can we recommend to our legislatures to help eliminate this raise of taxes, but not raise of income.
Sure, yeah, that's a tough one, right? I mean, I think that's what we're all trying to get at is what is the answer? And, you know, I mean, in the short term, I do think making our existing circuit breakers more generous, especially for people on a fixed income, that's gonna be the short-term solution. We're gonna want to see some of that. I mean, I really like the Michigan model. Unfortunately, it does get expensive. I think they spend about $350 million a year on their circuit breaker. Kansas might not have that kind of revenue, but again, this can be designed in such a way that if we could bring all of our existing programs into one, I think that would really help because then it's a more streamlined process as opposed to individuals having to go through and figure out which credit they qualify for, which credit would be best for them, and which credit they want to take advantage of ultimately. That's challenging. So getting it all into one streamlined process, making it more generous, those are two things we can do to help now. To help in the long term to prevent those valuation increases, again, we just need a bit larger supply of housing. I think that there's, you know, a lot of validity to sort of like those levy limits. It's not something I get into a whole bunch, but this is sort of a mechanism by which local governments are prevented from increasing their levies more than a certain amount. So it's a little bit less restrictive than, say, the assessment limits like California is.
Well, if we do that, we get that, is that gonna raise the taxes for everybody else to cover the payback?
It feasibly could, right? I mean, money doesn't come from nowhere, and I think that's why it's so important at this point that we look at expanding the tax base. And I don't necessarily mean just building new homes. I mean that we need to look at more creative methods of taxation. You know, sales taxes are pretty much topped out. I don't know anybody who wants to pay more sales taxes. Property taxes aren't too high. That's what we're talking about right here. And income taxes is something that has been just being chipped away at in recent years by the Kansas legislature. So what we need to look at probably is getting more creative with, say, excise taxes. One thought that I play around with is like a data collection tax. They have some model legislation in New York whereby companies pay based on a number of users whose data they harvest. And so that sort of acts as like both a disincentive to harvest the data and it's a good revenue raiser. So I think just getting creative like that and making sure that the burden isn't falling on low income families, fixed income seniors, and people who are already paying too much in taxes.
My representative tells me about something that I believe he calls Golden Years Act. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the Golden Years property tax program. So that one is sort of like what this gentleman was talking about with how the valuations keep going up, the taxes keep going up. The Golden Years program acts as a sort of freeze and keeps your taxes from going up from year to year. So you have like your base year where you apply for it, and once approved, that becomes your max property taxes in future years. I'm not 100% sure ability criteria, but it is an excellent program, especially for low income, fixed income seniors. So definitely something worth looking into. And, you know, again, it's one of those things where we have all these programs, and so it's hard to know which ones to take.
People don't know.
Exactly. And I don't think the state government does a really good job of marketing itself. So.
Yeah, two questions. First one's kind of a simple response from you, I think. The county assessor is often boogeyman because they keep the properties going up, if that's what the study shows. If a person successfully appeals that, and in fact does it a couple times, if they sell their place later on and it turns out that they were able to get a whole lot more money, in other words, the appraiser was probably correct, do they have to recover that property tax and pay the county, or did they just get off scot-free?
Yeah, so I mean, they're probably gonna get off scot-free with sales tax on that. But in terms of the property tax, no, I don't believe that there would be any sort of revenue recovery process in that case. If you succeeded on an appeal, I mean, that's case closed. And, you know, it should be with how arduous that appeal process is.
Okay. The other one though, all of the taxing units, when they have their yearly budget, they have to do this, revenue neutral or whatever. Can you explain that and how that works and more importantly, how that affects counties?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a revenue neutral statement in my bag. I should have brought it up here with me, knowing that I was gonna talk about property taxes. That revenue neutral stuff is, I don't know, it's sort of a misnomer in a way. Essentially how that works is that if an entity is planning to raise your property taxes more than is needed to maintain their previous year's funding levels, then they have to have a public comment period. And these statements are sort of difficult to decipher, and then you have to like have the time and the energy to want to go out to these public comment periods in the evening on a Wednesday or whatever. And then ultimately, it doesn't matter, it's a formality, right? It's just that they allow you that privilege, and then they'll take the vote, and more likely than not, they're going to go past that. So the revenue neutral is really good to stay aware, but in terms of teeth, there aren't really any.
My question is about disabled veterans. Other state has them, Texas has them. If you're 100% disabled, you don't pay property tax. And we're trying to get that here in Kansas, but I don't know what happened last time. I think she passed it, so something similar to that. But where are we on that?
Yeah, so disabled, 100% disabled veterans are treated differently in a lot of the circuit breakers that we have currently. They are able to very often take advantage of the same sort of benefits that like low-income seniors are, for example. I believe that they have a carve out in the golden years property tax freeze that I was just talking about. So there are some options, but in terms of how robust those options are, it could be more, honestly. And I think there's a lot of focus on it in the legislature. I do. I think at this point, with looking out to 2028, the state's in the red, finding any additional tax relief is going to be a challenge without raising additional revenue.
Yeah, I have a question about 1031 exchanges. Could you talk about that?
I don't know I don't know. Maybe you can give me a brief refresher because I'm not sure.
What I'm concerned about is the appraised value of homes in the Wichita area. We have people from the East Coast and the West Coast that form real estate investment trusts. And what they do is they accumulate money from people that are living in homes that are multi-million-dollar homes, putting the money in a trust, going into low-value areas, which they would consider Wichita being, and buying up a bunch of homes and paying a lot more than people that really live there can afford to pay. And then all of a sudden, you got a guy from California buying 15 homes because he sold one home in California. And then he starts renting them out, keeps them for a few years, then he sells them, and all this is done to avoid paying capital gains tax. And it's kind of, our neighborhood sort of like Beers. I know the houses that are appraised there aren't worth as much as they are, but that's what the appraiser says because of the homes that have been sold to these people. They're not a person, they're a real estate investment trust that was formed because of this thing called 1031 exchange, which I really don't know what it is. That's what they explained.
That's really helpful because, yeah, I didn't know the term myself, but I can speak a little bit to the practice though. And it's definitely predatory, I would say, because this sort of stuff does not only drive up valuations, as you mentioned, because they'll pay above market. It also decreases the housing supply because once they pay above market, whether they're going to flip it and then make another 50 grand on it, or whether they're going to want to rent it out at some exorbitant rate that nobody can afford because they overpaid for it, it has a real impact. It's sort of, it's very distortionary. Not quite in the same ways as like Proposition 13, but this is a real problem that I think is going on not only in the residential space, but in commercial as well.
You mentioned earlier, there are basically three sources of taxes. There's sales tax, income tax, property tax. Would it not make more sense? And you mentioned about this as far as income tax is concerned, we keep lowering income tax. Isn't that the tax that is most suited to your ability to pay? And wouldn't that make sense? Because I don't think most people realize we have two tax brackets in Kansas. And it's at a household income at 46,000. It's below 46,000 and above 46,000. And then you have a rate for above 46,000. And it doesn't matter if you make 46,000 or you make 460,000. It's the same rate. Wouldn't that make more sense to have another bracket or two?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The income tax is what's known as a progressive tax. And that's not progressive in the sense of liberal or anything. It's progressive in the sense that as your income rises, your tax burden progresses. They progress together. Whereas some of these other taxes, especially sales, is known as a regressive tax because it impacts people on the lower end of the income spectrum more. And so, yeah, the income tax is heavily tethered to your ability to pay. And as Mr. Schmidt just said, it doesn't matter if you're making $4 million or $46,000, you're paying the same rate in Kansas. And as of this last legislative session, we're actually on sort of a glide path to a flat tax. And that's not only for personal income, that's also corporate income. So once the goal is achieved there, it's a formulaic thing. I don't know how long it's going to take, but at the end of the day, once it's achieved, everyone in this room who pays income tax will be paying the exact same amount in income tax as, say, Walmart in Kansas. So we pretty much tied our hands with the income tax because any extra revenue that we gain from income tax is going to be used to buy down that rate for years to come. So that's problematic.
One more and then we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Sounds good. I'll get out of the hot seat.
I had two questions. What about reevaluation of how agricultural land is taxed? And secondly, utilities. Because it seems to me utilities are a monopoly. And they're not gonna leave the state if we increase the taxes. I understand to say, well, they'll just turn around and increase the tax to the consumer, which I get that. But maybe people won't recognize this as much as they do property taxes.
Yeah. So I think that with property taxes, it's one of those that's just really visible to people. So I think to your point, people might not notice the rate, although this last one kind of irritated a few people. But yeah, I mean, utilities are a publicly allowable monopoly, government sanctioned monopoly. And so that is a good option for raising revenue. As far as revaluation of agricultural land, I'm not an expert in agricultural taxation. That's a weird formula, but I do know that Representative Adam Smith introduced last session a bill to sort of apply a similar methodology to residential and commercial property in the sense that they would use a rolling average, the lesser of rolling average or fair market value to determine. So I think that could smooth things out. We gave neutral testimony on that, and I think it would have been great. I just wanted to see the number of years put into the statute so that the legislature couldn't mess around with it in future years.
Nathan, thank you. Thank you very much. Tomorrow morning, you will be at the Capitol building, talking again. Write your questions down. I'll corner him for you, and you can put him on the hot seat again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Here's your thumb drive. Here's your thumb drive.
Okay. We finally got to the end of today. Well, not quite. I'm going to turn the microphone over in a little bit to Katie. She said she had about 45 minutes that she wanted to talk and that's good. No, I guess not, okay. Let me do some announcements first here. Let me go through some of these first. Okay, try to get you acquainted with the booklet that you have in front of you and what's going on tomorrow, where you need to go, what you need to be doing, and how we're going to handle things. In some light of this year, we talked about starting the station at 9 o'clock instead of 8 o'clock. So we're doing it at 9 o'clock, but that makes us a little tight on tomorrow morning. So we're gonna cut back on some of the stuff that we do normally in the State House. We're not gonna take roll in the morning, we're not gonna call roll. We will do a swearing in, we have the colors posted, pledge of allegiance, and we have an invocation. And then we'll break and go to our committee meetings. In your booklet, you see what the committees are. Okay, and I think you also in the booklet, you see who the chair people are and the vice chairs of those committees. So if you signed up for the committee, doesn't mean you have to stay in that committee. But we'd like for you to go, we'd like to be able to spread everybody out to get everybody's opinion. But after hearing some things today, if you want to go to another committee, go, please. Participate, be an active member of what's going on with those. Everybody's got it registered. Everybody's got things, everything taken care of, I believe. Again, tomorrow, we're in the Supreme Court, old Supreme Court office, or Supreme Court courtroom, which is 346 South. So make sure you go to that on the 3rd floor. That's where we'll have our opening ceremonies. Then after that, we will then move down to our committee meetings. Business casual. In other words, leave your shorts at home. No shorts tomorrow, okay? Okay. Remember your phones in those rooms, please try to keep them turned off. We will be using the committee rooms and we will be trying to do WebEx for people, online. Phones ringing is gonna be hard for them to hear. I hope everything works out right for that as we go through that. If you have to speak, if you are a speaker or if you're on the panel, the meeting rooms, there'll be a U-shaped room set at the U if you're part of the Silver Haired Legislatures. The people that are presenting will sit back in the chairs in the back of the room. When you go on, when you turn to speak, make sure you push the button microphone on. Okay? Make sure that we'll make sure that the speaker has their microphone on. But you as a speaker, if you're sitting at the U, there's a little microphone, push the button and make sure it comes on, because if it doesn't come on, the people on television can't hear you. So we'll need to make sure that that's taken care of. Identify yourself, yes. If anybody wants to know, my name is Chuck. If you don't like what's going on, my name is Chuck. If you like what's going on, my name is Jay. No, something along that line, okay? Lunch will be on the 4th floor tomorrow. Same place it was last year, you have to go to the 4th floor, and that'll be in the south lobby. So we have lunch from 11 to 1, and our meetings are scheduled to go from 9:30 to 11:30. Chair people, vice chair people, try to get your committees done by that time if you can. Okay, and remember, this is a fun week. It hasn't been for Sherry and I with the computer this morning. So she thought I got it figured out and I took a deep breath, but have fun, ask questions and enjoy yourself. Chuck.
Thank you, Leroy. I think our speakers were wonderful today, by the way. That was so informative. But let me be quick here. What I'm to talk to you about is a committee and general session protocol. First of all, as mentioned, introduce yourself. Anytime you speak, introduce who you are. Say your name, what PSA you're from, and if you want to say what city, that's fine too. In the committee meetings, we have chairpersons, and I think we have assistant chairpersons assigned. They are in charge. Now, chairpersons, you have control of who speaks and how long they speak. So some of us like to talk longer than others, you may have noticed. But we have to kind of, we've got a lot of business to cover. So don't let people go on and on and on, and you have the gavel. And in two of the three committees, we have two different issues that we're dealing with. So we have to kind of figure out, don't use up all the time on one issue, and then you don't have anything left for the second issue. So work on that, think about that. When we come out of committees, you will have resolutions or bills ready to present to the full session, committee of the whole, when we go back into our committee of the whole. Have someone who is designated as the bill presenter. It doesn't have to be the committee chair, it can be somebody else in the committee, whoever you designate, but somebody is designated as the bill presenter, and then we have a script for you to follow when you do that in the committee of the whole. So we'll have a script. So let us know, committee chairs, let us know who your presenters are on your bills. Actually, they're resolutions, but so we know that. I already mentioned about, watch the time with speakers. Don't speak too long, and chairpersons, you're in charge. You have to kind of figure that out. Now, parking. Parking is always a bit of an issue, but it can be dealt with. There is a parking garage in the basement. Many of you that have been here before are familiar with that, but anyone new, you come in on 8th Street and you go down, and there's a whole parking garage down there, and that has visitor slots. Those visitor slots, as you drive in, you will see on the pillars, it will tell you numbers. At the back of the parking, where the back end of your car is, there will be a number written on the floor. It'll be, 146 and 148 or whatever. You'll see those numbers. And those numbers that are available for visitors will be on the poles as you go, the support pillars as you go in. So make sure you stay in a visitor parking spot. Okay, do not go into one that is not listed as a visitor parking spot, because then you might get a ticket. Because there are people still working in the Capitol, even though they're not in session right now. The legislators not here necessarily, but there's a lot of people, staff who work full time, and they still have parking spots in there. Now, it says in there that visitor parking is only good for 4 hours. Don't worry about that. I talked to security yesterday. They said, we're not going to enforce that. When the legislators are not here, it's usually not that full, and they know we're coming. And I said, we're a bunch of people coming in for just a couple of days. And they said, we understand it. We're not going to enforce the 4-hour limit. So once you're parked, you can stay for the whole day, as long as we'll be there. If you can't find parking in the underground garage, which I think what I would suggest is, if you can, let's carpool. Because it may not be enough spots for everybody to go individually. If you can carpool, that'll help. But if that fills up and you can't find individual parking, visitor parking down there, there's lots of paid parking out on the street. You can do that. Or if you are so inclined, if you don't mind walking a block or so, Van Buren is the street that comes directly north of the Capitol. And right at the center of the Capitol, it goes north. If you go north 1 block to 7th Street, between 6th and 7th Street, there is some parking there that is also free. Now, it's kind of odd because you have to back in to the parking spot, but you back in at an angle. But you can park there as well. I used to do that when I would come up during the legislative session, because a lot of times the parking garage is full, so I can park up there and I only have to walk a block to get there. So that's another possibility. It's Van Buren Street between Sixth and Seventh, and there are some free parking spots there. You have in your packets a seating chart for room 346S in the Capitol. That, and that's known as the old Supreme Court room. That's where they used to have Supreme Court before they built the big building to the south of the Capitol. So that's where we're going to gather at first in the morning at 9 o'clock. We have a little bit of a ceremony, a few things to go through, and then we'll go off to our committees. But give yourself plenty of time to get there. And especially if you're not real mobile, you need to give yourself some time. There are elevators everywhere. In steps, of course, if you want to climb the steps, but the numbers that you see are based on, they're on that floor. 346 is on the third floor, and our committee meetings are 100 something, and so they're all on the first floor. And then they're labeled S, M, E, or W for south, north, east, or west. Okay, so give yourself time to get there. And by the way, when you come into the parking garage in the basement, there is a, right at the center up against the Capitol itself is a place where you can get elevators or stairs that will take you up one floor, and then you will have to go through security. When you go through security, you'll have to take everything out of your pockets and whatnot. And if you're like me and you've got a few artificial joints, you'll probably set the alarm off, and you'll have to tell them, and they might heal you up or something. I don't know. But at our age, hey, what the heck, So give yourself time to get there. And then the last thing I'm going to say is after we're done, and Jay's got some things to talk about. When he's done, we'd like committee chairs to come up here, and the committee assistant chairs as well, and we'll just talk briefly about that. So Jay will then follow up with some information here.
For those of you that are directionally challenged, which when you get into Capitol, even if you normally have no problems, you will probably have an issue with what's what. If you go to that center banister that looks up to the Capitol dome or down the floor and look over the edge, there's a compass that tells you north, south, east, and west. And so if you're not sure where you're at, just look over there, and where you see the S, that's where all of our stuff takes place, whether it's the meeting rooms, whether it's the old Supreme Court, whether it's the meal, they're all on the S. So that's how you find that. Oh yeah, I think that some of you that've been here before might confirm this for me. The old Supreme Court room is the one that has the Brown versus Board of Education mural on the outside. Isn't that correct? So as you're walking around, when you see that really big mural, it's probably about the size of between the pillars over there. That's where that's where we're going to be. So our committee rooms are all on the first floor. It's sometimes hard to see the numbers. A couple of the rooms kind of set back off to the side or stuck in corners or whatever. But the first one is Committee 1. That's room 142 South. That's medicinal cannabis and property tax. So if that's what you're interested in, that's room 142 South. Committee 2 is room 159 South. That's one topic, and that's Medicaid preservation. And Committee 3, room 152 South, that's voting rights and senior transportation. And as he just said, if you have interest in more than one committee, and especially if the one committee has the one you're interested in first and the other committee has it last, don't hesitate to move around. We kind of like to have them somewhat balanced. We don't want 5 people in one committee and 40 in the other, in a different one. But so if you get to the committee and wow, it's really full, and you noticed one of the others wasn't so much, you might want to give that consideration. But if you have a really strong opinion on some of these topics, you feel comfortable going to the committee that you want to do. And as he said, where the delegates sit, but if there's more delegates than there are chairs, then some of the delegates will have to sit out in this, just general seating as well. But when they vote, you can still vote. So just because you're not up at the U doesn't mean you don't get to vote. Any questions? We usually finish around 4. Ballpark. And then come over to the back here and kind of take a little break and get yourself ready for, there will be a reception. And there will also be the silent auction before the banquet. Yes.
Can the chair tell us, are they gonna do cannabis first or property tax first?
I can't tell you. Who's the chair for committee 1? Gil, you know which one's first? I mean, we don't know by this time, but if you made a thought.
The cannabis property tax, we'll probably go cannabis first, property tax second.
Okay.
Just the way they're listed there. That's kind of the way we talk to our speakers that are coming
Okay,
in.
that's what usually determines what speakers. Yes.
And no speaker?
Each committee,
That's me.
each committee, the chair needs to designate one of the delegates to keep a brief set of minutes, just like at any meeting. They don't have to be greatly detailed, but it needs to be enough that when Donna gets it, she can put it into our regular minutes for the entire session. Hers are much more detailed. And that will at least give people later on, when you go back and look at the minutes, and give you an idea and a refresher of what they discussed and how they arrived at what they did.
For additional information on that, I have notebooks. I have 4 notebooks, but since there's only 3 committees, 1 notebook will go to each committee. I have pens if you need it. If anybody needs paper, I can tear paper out of the other notebook. If you go into the meeting, if you're a note taker, any handouts that are presented, please bring those to me too, as I will scan those in so that when I send out the notes and everything that goes out to everybody that cannot attend our meetings, they will see all this information. And I have had to go back through. I have them saved. What have I been coming, 5, 6 years now? I have all of them saved, scanned in. And I have had to go back through and go, well, we didn't have this resolution, I didn't have the final resolution. And as you go through and you make the resolutions, the next day when we start voting on those, the final resolutions will come in. And if they differ from ours, I need to see those so that everything is correct when we get them emailed out to everybody.
One final thing, if you did not get our booklet with the pink cover, they were at the south end of the tables in the registration. Please get one. You've got rosters which are beneficial to you all year long. If you need to contact another SHL delegate, there's name, phone number, address, email address, whatever you need. There's all the officers and the board members. There's the itinerary for the whole weekend. What do I have here on them? Oh, yeah. Most important reason we're here. The resolutions are in here. So if you did not get one, please do, because they are very valuable for what we're going to be doing, not only this weekend, but also for the rest of the year.
I know Chuck's gonna try to get the last word in, but I'm gonna beat him. Normally, we have name cards that we put on our desk in front of us. Not everybody's gonna have a desk tomorrow. But we're still gonna try to have the name cards, so when we're in the session and we're looking at them, Donna's got them, we're looking at them, and you wanna speak, wave them, so I can see what they are. I'll call, I'll probably be the one up front looking at it, and hold them still after you get my attention, because I can't read them while they're moving. Okay?
And so make sure you get that and have those and use those. I think Paula has already taken the extra pink bulletins and put them up. But she will have them there tomorrow at the state building, that's the Capitol building. So if you didn't get one today, we can't find, we'll get you one first thing in the morning. Okay, any other questions before I'm gonna let Chuck and Katie, no, Dawn? No?
I'm just testing to see if it works.
One quick point of order, and then I will shut up. Just for those of you who are new, the way this process works is we will gather as a committee of the whole first tomorrow morning in that old Supreme Court room. Then we will go into our committees. Then we'll have lunch, then we'll come back, and then we will debate and vote on whatever resolutions come out and with whatever amendments come out. We will do that tomorrow afternoon. Then, once that's finished, we're dismissed for that day. We'll come back for banquet, but we come back Thursday morning and we do a final vote. When we do the final vote on Thursday, there's no more debate. It's just a vote. Yeah, no changes and no more debate. It's just up or down vote. So if you have comments you want to make and you want to argue an issue, do it tomorrow in either the committee or in the committee of the whole. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I have one more. Remember, committees, you do not have to approve the resolution. I mean, a lot of times they are, but we have had them down through the years. You do not have to approve it. You will get to vote. You will get to make amendments on everything, and then you will vote. And if you vote it down, it's done. There's no more bringing it back this year, maybe next year, but it's done. So don't feel like that you automatically, well, I guess we all have to go along. No, if you have opinions that you're not in favor of that, vote accordingly. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll have, like you said, debates. We'll have amendments maybe. We'll have the votes. And then that's why we go till Thursday then with the final vote, and it's up or down. There is no changes, there's no amendments.
Can you move it out of committee without a vote for the body of the whole voter?
They have to approve. If they vote, if they don't approve it, then it's dead.
Okay, our Supreme President, Katie, will now address.
Leroy gave me 45 minutes.
Oh.
However, these three fellows have taken up 40. So there we are. I'm Katie Hoffman. I am the president and from the administrative side of our Silver Haired Legislature. I want to introduce 2 or 3 people who you might or might know. Our first vice president, Sherry Broken. Please stand up. You know, so thank you, Sherry, for joining us and doing all you do. Our second vice president is Mary Penrose. She worked. Our secretary is Donna Lehner from Maine. And our treasurer is Gary Scott, who's supposed to be minding my registration desk. So, I think that Leroy introduced all the legislative. But we have a couple of other interesting announcements. Dinner will be on your own. Sorry about that. They don't have a restaurant here. However, in lieu of having a restaurant here, from 7 to 9, there will be a hospitality room. And that will be in the La Flambeau room, which is basically behind the registration desk. 7 to 9, there'll be soft drinks, beer and wine, all complimentary. So after you get through with your dinner, come join everybody else and get further acquainted. The executive board will be meeting as soon as possible after this meeting adjourns, and that will be in the Maddie's West restaurant, which is as you come into the hotel, it'll be on your left. So those two announcements, we have tickets for lunch and dinner tomorrow. They were at the registration desk. If you don't have those, check with one of us and we'll get you some. Probably you'll be glad to have lunch and dinner anyway. What else? Oh, we wanted to remind everybody that, we are a nonpartisan organization. So sometimes we want to say something and we can't. And one of my favorite expressions is OSH, so on. I have to bite my tongue free, so we can't always say what we want. I think that that's probably all the administrative announcements. I was gonna share it.
I'll just say on the session tomorrow at the Capitol, everything is recorded, even though there might not be a person in the room. Everything is recorded in the committee room as well as in the old Supreme Court room, and those recordings will be available on YouTube after the fact. So you just want to keep that in mind as you provide comments. You're going on the recording. Yeah, be professional.
Is there a Zoom feature for people that aren't here?
WebEx.
WebEx.
It'll be sent out just as soon as I get off the Zoom.
Everybody make a new friend while you're here, somebody that you haven't met before. And I know this is a tough thing, but look for the blessing in you.
Yeah.
There is one. Sometimes it's tough to find. Enjoy.
The very last thing, John, would you come forward, please?
Daryl had some.
I just thought it would be good if we could welcome the delegates who are new since our last session. Maybe they can introduce themselves.
That'll be fine.
I know we have quite a few people that are new since our last session. I know you are, Tom, right?
No.
Who you are, what county?
Tom Sports from Dixon County, and that's PSA 8.
Marvin Singleton from PSA 11. And what county?
I don't need a speaker, but I'm Melissa Miller, Montgomery County, PSA 5. Melissa Miller, Montgomery County, I don't need a speaker. Yeah. Melissa Miller, PSA 5, Montgomery County, Independence, Kansas. Yep. And I know Chuck, I have lots of stories from Chuck.
Oh, tell him. Penny Bender, PSA 2, Sedgwick County, Wichita.
Rita Winter, PSA 8, Ellsworth.
I'm Tom Douglas, PSA 3, Brooks County, Plainfield.
Marshall Wood, PSA 8, Lyon County.
Over there.
I'm Gary Floyd, PSA 8, Morris County.
I'm Cindy Tannehill from PSA 2 in Wichita.
Okay, the very last thing, don't forget, 6:30 tomorrow morning, breakfast. It's served in the down the lobby just across where we checked in, and I buy breakfast. One more for those of you that are staying in the hotel. If you didn't get your ticket when you checked in, you're too late.
Got new people from PSA 5. And so I'm Alice from Allen County.
Cheryl Craig from Crawford County. Kate Bauer from Allen County.
Peter Ortolani from Montgomery County.
We'd like to welcome everyone. The very last thing I promised you. Thomas was not able to be with us today. He's still recovering from a foot injury that he's had. We have a plaque that we want to give to him this past. It says Kansas Silver Haired Legislature, President 2023-25, Thomas Gordon, and Jock is going to deliver that for us. Thomas, if you're listening, thank you for everything that you did.
We're not today.
Yay.
We can go check in then. Yeah, that's exactly.
Some